Between 1750 and 1900, frontier families developed sophisticated protection systems that meant the difference between seeing another sunrise and becoming another frontier tragedy. With no police, no backup, and predators that could tear through cabin walls, every precaution mattered. One failed security measure, one moment of carelessness, and a family might not wake up at all. Here's what life was really like protecting your family on the American frontier. So, yeah, if these stories work for you, subscribe. And I'm curious, what time is it where you are? Comment below. Last week, someone from Canada said they listened during lunch breaks. Not judging, just wasn't expecting that. We're heading to the American frontier in a minute. First, though, get comfortable. Seriously, take a second. Adjust whatever needs adjusting. You're not going to want to move once we start. Your eyes snap open to darkness. Complete darkness. The kind of darkness you've never experienced in your life. No streetlights. No ambient glow from electronics. No headlights passing by outside. Just black. The hard-packed dirt floor beneath your thin straw mattress has leached all the warmth from your body. Your back aches. The single wool blanket barely keeps the chill away. Not like your cozy bed right now. Something woke you. A sound? A feeling? You're not sure, but every nerve in your body is firing, telling you something's wrong. This is life on the frontier in 1750. This is what it meant to protect your family when civilization was just a distant memory. Your name is Thomas Marshall. You've been on the Pennsylvania frontier for 3 years now. You, your wife Sarah, and your 3 children, Emma, 10, William, 8, and little James, 4. You strain your ears listening. There it is again. A twig snap. Your heart pounds. Could be a deer, could be a wolf, could be a Shawnee raiding party. Thomas, Sarah whispers beside you. She's awake too. Of course she is. Out here, sleep is never deep, never restful. Your body doesn't allow it. I heard it, you whisper back. Stay with the children. You can hear the wind creaking through the cabin walls. The cabin you built with your own hands using tools you carried over 200 miles from Philadelphia. The cabin that's supposed to keep your family safe. Think it's a bear? Sarah asks, her voice barely audible. You've had 2 bear encounters already this year. The last one tore through the smokehouse like it was made of paper. Bears can smell food from miles away. And they can tear through log walls if they're hungry enough. Maybe, you say, reaching for your Pennsylvania long rifle. The metal is cold against your fingers. Your powder horn hangs from a peg by the door, always ready. The kids are still asleep, small mercies. You sit up slowly, every sense heightened. This is what people back east don't understand. This constant vigilance, this waiting for death that might come at any moment. Oh, and get this, you can't just turn on a light to see what's happening. Your only options are to either open the door, possibly exposing yourself to whatever's out there, or light a candle, which takes precious time and makes you visible through the cabin's single window. Fun choices, right? Another sound. Closer this time. A low growl. Okay, so not a raiding party. But a wolf or bear isn't much better. Wolf, Sarah whispers, confirming your thoughts. You reach for your powder horn, moving carefully in the darkness. Your fingers find the familiar shape. You begin the loading process. Something you've done thousands of times. Something you could do in your sleep. And sometimes, like tonight, you practically are. Is it alone? Sarah asks. The real fear isn't a lone wolf, it's a pack. Wolves rarely attack humans, but in winter, when game is scarce, when they're desperate, they get bold, and it's been a hard winter. Don't know yet, you whisper. Your dog Burke sleeps by the door. He hasn't made a sound, which is strange. He usually alerts to wolves. You wonder if he's... Suddenly Burke lets out a low growl. His ears are up, his body tense. He smells more than one, Sarah says. You finish loading the rifle. The wolf outside growls again, and now you hear movement. Multiple sets of paws on frozen ground. Pack, you confirm. Sarah slides out of bed, moving to where the children sleep. Protection instinct. If wolves somehow break in, she'll place herself between them and the kids. This is the reality of frontier life. Every night could be your last. Every sound could mean death. You move to the small window, positioned high on the wall. You designed it that way, small enough that nothing large could enter, high enough to make it difficult for raiders to shoot in, but low enough that you could fire out if needed. Seems excessive until you realize that frontier families who didn't take these precautions often didn't survive their first year. Can you see anything? Sarah asks. You peer through the greased paper that serves as your window. No glass out here. Glass is a luxury for city folk. The moonlight provides just enough illumination to make out shapes. 3, maybe 4 wolves. Circling the cabin, Sarah makes a small, tight sound. She knows what this means. If the wolves are desperate enough to approach the cabin, they might try to get to the livestock pen, and your cow and 2 pigs are the difference between feeding your family this winter and starving. The pen will hold, you say, trying to sound confident. But will it? You built it strong, with logs sunk deep into the ground and lashed together. But wolves are clever, and desperate wolves are dangerous. We should have listened to the McGraths, Sarah says, built the noise alarms. The McGraths are your nearest neighbours 5 miles east. They've been on the frontier for 20 years. They hang gourds filled with pebbles from trees around their property. When disturbed by wind, animals or people, they make a rattling noise that serves as an early warning system. You thought it seemed silly when they suggested it. You're not laughing now. Burke's growling intensifies. Something's changed outside. You look again. The wolves have moved toward the livestock pen. They're testing the fence, looking for weaknesses. I need to scare them off, you say, reaching for the door. Sarah grabs your arm. Are you insane? It's 4 against 1. If they kill the cow, we won't make it to spring. It's a brutal calculation, but a real one. Your life versus your family's survival. At least fire from the window, she pleads. You nod. You position yourself at the window, aiming your rifle at the nearest wolf. The animal is gaunt, ribs showing. It's been a hard winter for everyone. You take a breath, aim, and fire. The blast is deafening in the small cabin. The children wake, startled and crying. The wolf you aimed at yelps and drops. The others scatter, but you know they might return. Did you get one? Sarah asks, trying to comfort little James, who's wailing in fear. I did. But they'll be back. And this is the truth of frontier life. The threats never truly go away. You just buy yourself time, another night of survival. We need better protection, you say, watching the wolves retreat into the forest. The McGraths are right. Sarah nods, rocking James. Tomorrow we'll start. Gourds with pebbles, trip lines round the perimeter. I'll clear more of the brush away, you add. 50 yards in all directions, no cover for anything to sneak up. Emma and William are huddled together, eyes wide with fear. They've seen this before, too many times for children so young. "Will they come back tonight, Pa?" William asks. "Maybe, but we'll be ready." "I'll keep watch with you," Emma offers. At 10 years old, she's already tougher than most grown men back east. "No, little one, you need your sleep, but tomorrow you can help me make the alarm systems." Emma nods, proud to be included. This is something city folk wouldn't understand either. On the frontier, children aren't just children. They're essential parts of the family security system. By age 8, most frontier children know how to load and fire a rifle. By 12, they're taking watch shifts. Your survival depends on everyone doing their part. You spent the rest of the night by the window, rifle reloaded, watching. The wolves don't return, but you know they're out there, waiting, hungry. As the first hint of dawn lightens the eastern sky, you finally relax slightly. Night is the most dangerous time. Most predators, animal and human, prefer the cover of darkness. "We made it," Sarah says softly, handing you a cup of water. "This time," you reply. Later that morning, you walk the perimeter of your small clearing. The dead wolf lies where it fell. You'll skin it later, waste nothing on the frontier. You study the ground, reading the story written in the dirt and snow. 4 wolves, as you thought. They circled the cabin 3 times before approaching the livestock pen. They were testing, looking for weaknesses. "Pa! Pa!" William calls, running from the cabin. "Look what I found!" He's holding something in his hand. A small piece of shaped wood with notches cut into it. "Where did you find this?" you ask, taking it from him. "By the big oak. There's more stuff too." You follow your son to the oak tree at the edge of your clearing. There, half buried in leaves, you find 3 wooden stakes with notches. They're arranged in a pattern that seems deliberate. A cold feeling settles in your stomach. These aren't from animals. "Go back to the cabin," you tell William. "Now." The boy doesn't argue. He's learned that tone means danger. You examine the stakes more carefully. This is a marker. Raiders, whether Native American or white, sometimes leave markers to indicate promising targets. The notches tell others how many people live here, what livestock you have. You've been scouted. The wolves were bad. This is worse. You gather the stakes and return to the cabin. Sarah takes one look at your face and knows. "What is it?" You show her the stakes. "We've been marked." Her face pales. "Raiders? Most likely. We need to prepare." And just like that, your family's entire focus shifts. The frontier doesn't allow for panic or despair, only action. Emma, collect as many gourds as you can find in the root cellar, you instruct. William, gather small stones, about the size of your thumbnail. Sarah is already moving, checking your ammunition supply. "I'll start clearing the brush," you say. "We need clear sight lines in all directions." This is frontier life in 1750. This is how families survived, or didn't. By midday, you've cleared another 10 yards of brush around the cabin. Emma and William have prepared a dozen gourds with pebbles inside, ready to be hung as alarms. Sarah has inventoried your supplies and moved essential items to the small root cellar, a last refuge if the cabin is overrun. As you work, you keep thinking about the McGrath's other security measures, tripwires between trees, a system for communicating with neighbours miles away. hiding places for weapons and supplies. You'd thought them paranoid. Now you understand. On the frontier, paranoia is just good sense. That night you hang the first of the gourd alarms. They look strange, dangling from tree branches, but their purpose is deadly serious. Any disturbance will cause them to rattle, giving you precious seconds of warning. "Will it be enough?" Sarah asks as you return to the cabin. "No," you answer honestly, "but it's a start." You take the first watch sitting by the window with your rifle across your lap. The children sleep fitfully. Burke lies by the door, alert and tense. This is just the beginning. In the coming days, you'll create more security systems, tripwires with more noisemakers, a better reinforced door, designated firing positions, a rotation so someone is always on watch. Because out here, between civilization and wilderness, a family's survival depends on their ability to detect, deter, and defeat threats using only what they can make with their own hands. The night stretches long before you. In the distance, wolves howl. Closer, one of your gourd alarms rattles in the wind. Or is it the wind? You raise your rifle, peering into the darkness, and wait. This is the frontier. This is survival. This is just the beginning of your family's fight to see another dawn. And all across the American wilderness, thousands of other families are doing exactly the same thing tonight. Creating protection systems, standing watch, listening to the darkness, fighting to survive until morning. And as you sit in your comfortable bed, safe and warm, consider this. The security systems developed by these frontier families were more sophisticated and effective than many modern alternatives. Born of necessity and refined through blood and loss, they represent one of the most remarkable achievements of American frontier life. The ability to survive when everything, nature, other humans, even the land itself, seem determined to destroy you. Sleep well, you've earned it, but maybe keep one ear open, just in case. The next morning you're up before dawn. Sleep isn't really sleep on the frontier, it's just waiting with your eyes closed. 25 years have passed since that night with the wolves. It's now 1775, and the frontier has pushed westward. Your family moved with it, settling in western Pennsylvania closer to Fort Pitt. Your children have grown. Emma married a trapper named John and lives 10 miles north. William helps run the homestead. James, no longer little, stands nearly as tall as you. And the threats, they've evolved too. The cabin you've built here is twice the size of your first. Experience has made you a better builder, a better settler, a better survivor. "Pa, the eastern line is set," James calls, walking back from the tree line. At 29, he's sturdy and weathered, like most frontier men. His rifle rests casually across his shoulders. "Any signs?" you ask, looking up from the wooden stake you're sharpening. "Nothing fresh, but I found deer tracks near the creek," you nod. Deer are good, both for food and as an early warning system. Deer sense danger before humans do. If they suddenly bolt, something spooked them. "Think it's gonna work?" James asks, eyeing the elaborate wire system you're installing. "McGrath swore by it before he died," you say. Funny how things come full circle. 25 years ago, the McGraths taught you about gourd alarms. Now you're the old-timer implementing security systems the younger settlers haven't even thought of. Seems like a lot of work for something that might never happen, Sarah says, joining you outside. Her hair has gone grey, her face lined by sun and worry, but she's still strong, still vigilant. That's the point, you say. If it works right, nothing happens. Your security systems have expanded dramatically over the years. The simple gourd alarms have been supplemented with an intricate network of trip wires, thin cords strung between trees at ankle height, connected to more elaborate noisemakers, tin cans with pebbles, metal pieces that clang together. Remember the Carter family, you ask? 3 miles east of our old place? Sarah's face darkens. All 6 of them, gone in one night. No alarm system, you say simply. William emerges from the cabin, rifle in hand. Northeast perimeter is quiet, he reports. Your family has developed a watch rotation system. 4 4-hour shifts throughout the night split between you, William, James, and Sarah. No one pulls consecutive shifts. A tired guard is a useless guard. Burke's son is acting funny, William adds, referring to your current dog, named after your first. Keep staring south. You all pause, looking toward the dog. He's standing stiff-legged at the edge of the clearing, ears forward, focused on something you can't see. Could be nothing, James says. Could be something, you counter. That's the reality of frontier life. Everything could be nothing. Everything could be death approaching. I'll check the south line, William volunteers, already moving. Your tripwire system forms a perimeter roughly 50 yards from the cabin in all directions. Beyond that, you've cleared another 50 yards of brush and small trees, creating what military men call a kill zone. Any approach to your cabin requires crossing open ground. Should we bring in the livestock? Sarah asks. You have more now. 4 cows, a dozen chickens, 2 horses, and 6 pigs. Enough that raiders might consider it worth their while. Not yet, you decide, but be ready. Inside the cabin, your newest security addition waits. A simple system of pulleys that allows the heavy wooden bar to be dropped across the door from a distance. If you're outside and spot danger, you can run for the cabin and secure the door without having to stop and lift the heavy bar into place. It sounds like a small thing until you're running for your life with raiders 20 yards behind you. Pa! William's voice carries from the south edge of your property. Not panicked, but urgent. You and James grab your rifles and move quickly toward him. Sarah stays by the cabin, her own rifle ready. Another lesson learned over decades. Never leave your fallback position undefended. William is crouched by a large oak tree when you reach him. He points to the ground. Moccasin prints. 5, maybe 6 men. Your stomach tightens. How old? Fresh. Last few hours. You examine the prints. They're deep. The men are carrying heavy loads. Probably weapons and empty packs they intend to fill with plunder. Your plunder. They're scouting, you say. They'll be back tonight. Shawnee, James asks. You shake your head. Delaware, most likely. See the pattern on this print? Their moccasins have a different cut. This knowledge, being able to identify not just that danger is coming, but what kind, is the difference between life and death on the frontier. What's the plan? William asks. You consider your options. You could abandon the cabin, gather what you can carry and head for Fort Pitt. You could try to mount a defense with just the 4 of you, or you could call for help. James, ride to the Thornton place, you decide. Tell them we've spotted Delaware scouts. If they're hitting us, they might hit others. The Thorntons live 5 miles west. Beyond them are the Clarks. and beyond them, the Millers, an informal network of frontier families ready to come to each other's aid. "What about Emma?" Sarah asks when you return to the cabin. "William will ride north and warn her and John after we finish setting the wires." Inside the cabin, you gather around the table, rough-hewn oak that doubles as a defensive barrier if the cabin is breached. You can flip it on its side for cover. "We have maybe 6 hours of daylight left," you say. "We need to finish the south line, bring in the livestock, and prepare the cabin." The preparations are methodical, refined over 25 years of frontier living. James rides for the Thorntons. You and William complete the tripwire system on the south edge of your property, adding extra noisemakers. Sarah brings the animals into the inner pen, the one directly adjacent to the cabin, with walls built from logs as thick as a man's thigh. By late afternoon, William has ridden to warn Emma and John. You've positioned extra weapons around the cabin, your long rifle by the north window, a fowling piece loaded with buckshot by the south, pistols by the east and west, axes and knives placed strategically throughout. "The signal horn?" Sarah asks. You nod. "Ready by the door." Another part of your defense system, a bullhorn that can be heard for miles. 3 short blasts means raiders. A continuous blow means fire. 2 long blasts means all clear. The security systems you've developed aren't just about physical protection. They're about communication, coordination. The frontier isn't kind to lone wolves. As dusk approaches, William returns. Emma and John are warned. They're bringing their children to the Caldwell place for the night. Safety in numbers. You nod, satisfied. Emma has 4 children now. Your grandchildren. The oldest is 12. The youngest just 3. They're the future you're fighting to protect. Darkness falls across the frontier. Your family takes positions. You at the north window, William at the south, James at the east. Sarah moves between the west window and the children's sleeping area, which has been reinforced with extra logs to create a final fallback position. The first few hours pass in tense silence. "Maybe they won't come," James whispers at one point. "They'll come," you say. "You've been on the frontier too long to believe in reprieves." Around midnight the first alarm sounds. A rattling from the south perimeter. Then silence. "They've found the trip wires," William says. "They'll be more careful now." Another hour passes. The dog growls softly, staring at the south wall. Then, a flash of movement in the moonlight, a shadow detaching itself from the tree line. Then another, and another. "I count 5, James whispers. 6, William corrects. "There's one by the big elm." You watch as the raiders pause at the edge of the cleared area. They've realized they'll have to cross 50 yards of open ground to reach the cabin. They're reconsidering. Good. That's the purpose of clearing the brush. Make them think twice. The raiders confer among themselves. Then they begin to spread out, circling the cabin. They're looking for a blind spot, you say, a way to approach under cover. This is why your windows are positioned to cover all approaches. No blind spots. "What if they wait us out?" James asks. "They won't," you answer. "Raiders don't have patience. They want quick targets. If we make it difficult, they'll move on to easier prey." It's a harsh truth of frontier life. Your security isn't just about keeping danger out. It's about making yourself a less appealing target than your neighbours. The Darwinian reality no one talks about back east. The minutes stretch into another hour. The raiders haven't retreated, but they haven't advanced either. They're probing, looking for weaknesses. Suddenly, Burke's son begins barking furiously at the north wall. They're splitting up, you realise, trying to divide our attention. This is why you train for coordinated defence, why each family member has assigned positions and responsibilities. Hold positions, you order. They're testing us. The dog continues barking. Through your window you can see two figures attempting to approach from the north. They freeze when the dog alerts. Then chaos erupts. A flaming arrow arcs through the night, landing on the cabin roof. "Fire!" Sarah shouts. Before panic can set in, William is already moving. He grabs the water bucket positioned by the ladder. Part of your fire defence system. He's up the ladder and onto the roof in seconds, dousing the flames before they can spread. This is what preparation looks like. This is why you drill for different threats. The raiders, seeing their fire attack fail, change tactics. 3 rush the south wall while the others provide covering fire. "South!" you shout, and James shifts to support William. Rifle fire erupts from the cabin. 1 raider falls. The others retreat to the tree line. "They'll try again," you say. "Different angle." And they do, this time attempting to reach the livestock pen. If they can't breach the cabin, they'll settle for stealing your animals. But the inner pen is built like a fortress, with firing ports that allow you to defend the animals without exposing yourselves. James fires through one such port, and another raider clutches his leg, dragging himself back toward the trees. 2 down, James says grimly. The night continues this way. Probing attacks, defensive fire, retreats. A deadly dance perfected over generations of frontier conflict. Finally, as the eastern sky begins to lighten, the raiders withdraw. They've lost 2 men injured, gained nothing, and dawn is approaching, eliminating their cover of darkness. "They're gone," William says after 30 minutes of silence. "For now, you amend." As the sun rises, you examine your defences. The tripwires worked, alerted you to their initial approach. The cleared ground forced them to hesitate. The coordinated defence prevented them from finding a weak point. "We should reinforce the roof," William suggests. "More fire protection." You nod. "And we need better positions to defend the north wall." This is how frontier security evolved. Through blood and fire and midnight attacks, through constant refinement, through the harsh tutelage of survival. Later that day, riders appear from the west, the Thorntons and Clarks coming to check on you after hearing from James. "Saw tracks of a raiding party heading south," Robert Thornton says. "Looks like they hit you and moved on." "Tried to," you correct. "Didn't get past the outer perimeter." Robert nods approvingly. "Those tripwires you showed me last month. Think I'll be setting those up myself now." Knowledge spreads across the frontier this way, family to family, homestead to homestead. The security innovations of one become the survival tools of many. By 1800, frontier families across the American wilderness have developed integrated security systems far more sophisticated than anything found in eastern cities. Not just physical barriers, but early warning networks, communication systems, cooperative defense agreements between families spread across miles of wilderness. Your own system continues to evolve. The tripwires become more elaborate, with different types of noisemakers to indicate which section of your perimeter has been breached. The animal sentinels, dogs, geese, even chickens, are positioned strategically to provide overlapping alerts. You develop hidden caches of weapons and supplies buried at intervals around your property. If you're forced to flee the cabin, you won't have to run empty-handed. Sarah creates a system of mirror signals that can communicate with Emma's cabin on clear days, allowing for warnings without risking a messenger. The children learn that survival isn't just about shooting straight or building strong walls. It's about eyes that notice broken twigs and disturbed earth, ears that distinguish between the wind and footsteps, instincts honed by years of balancing on the knife edge between life and death. Sometimes I wonder what it would be like, Sarah says one evening, to sleep through the night, to not listen for alarms. You take her hand. After 30 years on the frontier, it's weathered and calloused like your own. Folks back east sleep different, you agree, but they don't hear things the way we do, don't see things, don't survive things, she adds softly. In 1800, as a new century dawns, your family stands as testament to the remarkable human capacity for adaptation, for creating security from nothing but ingenuity and determination, for turning wilderness into home, no matter how hostile. Your early warning systems, the tripwires, animal sentinels and noise alarms, have become the difference between life and death countless times, not just for your family, but for others who have learned from you. As the frontier continues to push westward, these systems will evolve further, but their foundations, the principles discovered through blood and loss by families like yours, will remain. The frontier has no patience for theoretical security, only what works, only what keeps you alive until dawn. And as you sit in your comfortable modern bed, without tripwires or rifle by your side, consider this. The security you enjoy was purchased by generations who created protection systems from nothing but necessity and raw materials, who lay awake listening for alarms that meant the difference between life and death. Your family survived because you learned to hear danger before it arrived, to create warning systems that could detect threats in complete darkness, to transform common objects, gourds, wire, tin cans, into sophisticated alarm networks. This is the legacy of frontier security, not just survival, but innovation born of desperate necessity. The tripwires remain set as darkness falls again. The dog lies alert by the door. The watch rotation continues, an unbroken vigil stretching across decades of frontier nights. Listening for the sound of danger, waiting for the alarms, standing guard while others sleep, dawn breaks over a different frontier. The year's 1820, and you're no longer in Pennsylvania. The westward push has brought your family to the Ohio Territory, where the land is richer, but the dangers are greater. You're 70 now, your hands gnarled with arthritis, your eyes not as sharp as they once were. But your mind is a vault of survival knowledge earned through blood and vigilance. Your son William runs the homestead now, with his wife Mary and their 5 children. James moved further west years ago, seeking new lands in Kentucky. Emma and her family settled 20 miles north, where the hunting is better. The cabin you helped William build here dwarfs anything from your early days. It's not just bigger, it's a fortress disguised as a home. Grandfather, look what I found! 8-year-old Thomas, your grandson named after you, runs across the yard holding something in his hands. Careful there, you caution. Even at 70, you scan the tree line automatically. Open ground is dangerous ground. Thomas reaches you, breathless with excitement. In his hands is a small carved wooden fox. Uncle James sent it. The messenger brought letters too. You take the carving, admiring your younger son's handiwork. Your uncle always had clever hands. Father says I can help set the new wall spikes today, Thomas says proudly. You nod. Think you're ready for that responsibility? Yes, sir, he says, standing straighter. I've been practicing with the small hatchet like you showed me. From the cabin, William emerges, carrying a bundle of sharpened stakes. At 45, he's the image of you in your prime, weathered, vigilant, capable. The frontier shapes men a certain way. Pa, you shouldn't be sitting out in the open like this, he scolds gently. You chuckle. Can't ambush me if I can see him coming. This is your legacy. Not just the physical security systems you've developed over 7 decades, but the mindset, the constant awareness, the preparation for threats that may never come but will certainly kill you if you're not ready. Come see what we're adding to the north wall, William says, helping you to your feet. The north wall isn't the cabin wall, it's the palisade, a 10-foot barrier of sharpened logs encircling the entire homestead. Within this outer perimeter sits the cabin, the barn, the smokehouse, the workshop, and most importantly, the well. The palisade is your first line of physical defense after the early warning systems. The logs are set 3 feet into the ground and rise another 10 feet above it. Each log is sharpened to a wicked point at the top, making it nearly impossible to climb over without serious injury. William leads you to where a section of the north wall is being reinforced. Your grandsons, John, just 14, and Benjamin, just 12, are digging holes for new support posts. We're adding the iron spikes you suggested, William explains. Managed to trade for 30 of them when I was in Colombia last month. The iron spikes, another innovation. Salvaged from broken wagon parts and farm implements, they're mounted horizontally through the palisade logs, creating wicked protrusions that would tear the flesh of anyone trying to climb or break through. Got the idea from an old fort design, you tell Thomas, who listens with wide eyes. Iron's scarce out here, but it's worth using for security. Why not just make the wall higher, Thomas asks. William ruffles his son's hair. What happens to higher walls in high winds, son? They fall over easier, Thomas answers, repeating a lesson he's obviously heard before. That's right. Better a 10-foot wall that stands than a 15-foot wall that fails. This practical wisdom, passed from generation to generation, is what keeps frontier families alive. Not theory, but hard-earned experience. You watch as your grandsons work, remembering when William was their age, helping you set tripwires in Pennsylvania. Now he's teaching his own sons. The knowledge flows down, refined with each generation. Show me the new workshop security, you say. William nods, leading you across the compound. The family workshop sits near the eastern edge of the palisade, a sturdy log structure where tools, weapons, and farm implements are stored and repaired. Finally put in that reinforced door you've been harping about, William says with a grin. The door is a masterpiece of frontier engineering, 3 inches thick, made from oak planks cross-braced with iron bands. The hinges are set on the inside, making them impossible to access from outside. Most impressively, the locking mechanism is a complex iron bar system that secures the door at 3 points, top, middle, and bottom. Doubt even a cannon could get through that, you say approvingly. That's not even the best part, William says. He leads you inside and points to the floor. Show your grandfather what you helped build, John. Your oldest grandson grins proudly, stomping his foot twice on a seemingly ordinary section of the plank floor. On the second stomp, a hidden catch releases and a trap door swings open, revealing a ladder descending into darkness. Root cellar, you ask? Better, William says. Come see. Carefully, you descend the ladder, your old bones protesting. At the bottom, William lights a candle, revealing not a simple root cellar, but an underground chamber nearly 20 feet long and 10 feet wide, the walls reinforced with timber supports. Sweet Lord, you breathe. How long did this take you? 3 months, working nights, William says proudly. The boys and I dug it out while the women kept it secret. Wanted to surprise you. The chamber contains shelves stocked with preserved food, water barrels, ammunition, spare weapons, medical supplies, everything a family would need to survive if the cabin above was overrun or destroyed. There's more, William says, leading you to the far end of the chamber. He pushes aside a stack of empty barrels, revealing another smaller tunnel. Goes all the way to the spring beyond the south palisade. If we're ever completely surrounded, we can escape underground. You run your hand along the roughly hewn tunnel entrance, marvelling at the ingenuity. In your 50 years on the frontier, you've never seen a more complete defensive setup. William, you say, your voice thick with emotion. Your mother would be proud. Sarah passed 5 winters ago. She never saw this place, this culmination of the security principles you both developed over decades of frontier life. Learned from the best, William says simply. Back above ground, you tour the rest of the compound's defences. The cabin itself is a masterpiece of defensive architecture. The logs are nearly a foot thick, chinked with clay mixed with animal hair for strength. The few windows are small and set high in the walls, allowing light while making it difficult for attackers to shoot in or climb through. Remember that family near Fort Pitt, you ask William. The Nortons? William nods grimly. Raiders shot through their windows while they slept, all dead before they knew what happened. Big windows, you say, facing the tree line. Thomas, who has been trailing along, listens with wide eyes. Is that why our windows are so small, grandfather? That's right, you confirm. Small targets are harder to hit. Outside the cabin, William shows you their newest innovation. Angled wooden deflectors above each window and door. If attackers try to set fire to the roof by shooting flaming arrows, the deflectors will direct them away from the structure. Mary's idea, William says, nodding toward his wife who's hanging laundry nearby. After we heard about the Thompsons losing their place to fire. Mary waves, then returns to her work, one eye always on their palisade wall, one ear always alert for alarm signals. Frontier women aren't just helpmates, they're essential components of the family security system. She's a good woman, you say, smart. Saved our lives last winter, William agrees. Spotted those wolf tracks before anyone else. You continue your inspection, noting with approval the carefully planned defensive zones within the palisade. The family has created layered defenses, obstacles that force any attackers who breach the outer wall to move through predetermined areas where defenders have clear shots from multiple positions. Fallen logs, deliberately placed thorn bushes, even carefully arranged wood piles. Everything serves dual purposes, resources for daily life and obstacles for defense. What about the livestock pen, you ask? William leads you to the western edge of the compound, where a sturdy enclosure houses the family's most valuable mobile assets: 4 horses, 6 cows, a dozen pigs, and a flock of chickens and geese. The pen is a fortress in its own right. Logs sunk deep into the ground, reinforced gate, and most importantly, a covered passage connecting it directly to the main cabin. If there's a raid, we can bring the animals in without exposing ourselves, William explains, or at least defend them without having to cross open ground. You nod approvingly. Livestock represents more than food. They're the difference between prosperity and starvation, between having trade goods and having nothing. On the frontier, a family's animals are worth killing to protect. Water, you ask, moving to your next concern. William grins. Best part of the whole setup. He leads you to what appears to be a small storage shed near the centre of the compound. Inside, however, is a hand-dug well, a precious resource that ensures the family can withstand even prolonged sieges without leaving the safety of the palisade. 30 feet down to hit good water, William says proudly. Took almost a year of digging after work. The well is covered and protected, with a simple pulley system to raise and lower buckets. More importantly, it's positioned where it can be accessed from multiple defensive positions without exposure. If raiders breach the palisade, we can still get to water without leaving the cabin, William explains. This attention to detail, planning for scenarios where even your first and second defensive layers have failed, is what separates survivors from victims on the frontier. As evening approaches, you watch the family's security protocols snap into place with practiced efficiency. The youngest children bring in smaller livestock. Teenagers check tripwires and alarm systems. Adults verify that weapons are loaded and positioned at defensive points. By nightfall, the compound is secure, a small island of safety in a vast wilderness of potential threats. After dinner, you sit by the fire, whittling a small toy as your grandchildren gather around. "Tell us about the old days, grandfather," Benjamin pleads. "About the first cabin." You chuckle. That old place wasn't much more than a shack compared to this fortress. "Did it have a palisade?" Thomas asks. "No palisade, no workshop, no hidden tunnels," you reply. "Just 4 walls, a roof, and danger all around." "How did you survive?" John asks, genuinely puzzled. To these children, born into a world of layered defenses and security protocols, the idea of a cabin without protections is almost unimaginable. "We learned," you say simply. "Every attack, every near miss, every tragedy, we learned and improved." "Like when the Millers lost their place?" Benjamin asks. You nod solemnly. "The Millers didn't reinforce their door. Raiders broke through in seconds. After that, everyone on the frontier started using crossbars and iron hinges." "And the Campbells?" John prompts. He's heard these stories before, cautionary tales passed down as survival lessons. "The Campbells built their cabin too close to the tree line," you explain. "Raiders could approach under cover right up to their walls. That's why we clear 50 yards in all directions." This is how frontier knowledge spreads, through stories of success and failure, life and death. The education is harsh but effective. "Is that why the Morrison family moved their cabin last summer?" Thomas asks. William nods. Smart of them to realize their mistake before it cost them. Later, as the children are put to bed, you sit with William on the cabin's small porch, itself a defensive position. with thick log rails that can serve as cover during an attack. Sometimes I wonder if we're being excessive, William admits quietly. All these defences, all this preparation, and we've only had 3 serious threats in 10 years. You lay a hand on your son's shoulder. We've only had 3 serious threats because of these defences. The preparedness is what keeps us safe. Raiders and predators look for easy targets. William nods, understanding. This is the paradox of frontier security. The more effectively you prepare, the less likely you are to face danger. But any lapse, any moment of complacency can be fatal. The children have never known anything different, he says, watching as a fox darts across the clearing beyond the palisade. To them, tripwires and reinforced doors are just normal. That's how it should be, you reply. The knowledge becomes instinct, second nature. As night deepens, you retire to your small room, a space William insisted on adding to the cabin just for you. Through the tiny window, you can see the stars above the palisade wall. You think about how far frontier security has come in your lifetime, from simple cabins vulnerable to any passing threat, to these sophisticated compounds with layered defences and contingency plans. You think about the thousands of families across the expanding American frontier, each developing their own protection systems, each learning, sometimes through tragedy, how to survive in a land where danger can come from any direction. The physical barriers pioneered by your generation, the palisades, reinforced cabins, defensive architecture, have transformed frontier life. They've created safe zones where families can not just survive, but thrive. As sleep approaches, you hear the familiar sounds of the night watch changing. William handing over to his oldest son John, the quiet murmur of instructions, the careful checking of weapons. The vigil continues, as it has for 70 years of frontier nights, the protection systems you helped develop standing between your family and the darkness beyond, and you rest easier knowing that the knowledge hasn't been lost. It's been passed down, improved upon, expanded. Your grandchildren will survive because they've been taught to build not just homes but fortresses, not just shelters, but survival systems. This is your true legacy, not the land or the cabin or even the palisade wall, but the knowledge, the security principles that will keep your blood alive for generations to come. In the darkness, an owl calls. The dog shifts but doesn't bark. All is secure, all is well for tonight. The wagon creaks under the weight of your belongings as you guide the oxen across the open prairie. The year is 1835, and the American frontier has pushed beyond Ohio, through Indiana, and into the Illinois Territory. You're Thomas Marshall, named after your grandfather, and at 23, you're leading your own family west. Your wife Rebecca sits beside you, one hand resting protectively on her swollen belly. Your first child due in less than a month. You sure about this spot? Your father William asks, riding alongside on his bay mare. At 60, he's still strong enough to make this journey with you, to help establish your homestead before returning to Ohio. I'm sure, Pa, you reply, pointing toward a distant rise. Creek runs along the south edge, good timber on the north slope, high ground with clear sight lines. William nods approvingly. The security considerations come automatically to you, ingrained since childhood. You don't just see land, you see defensive positions, resource access, threat vectors. Good choice, he says, though I still think you should have stayed in Ohio. You understand his concern. A new baby coming, new territory with unfamiliar threats. But you've prepared for this moment your entire life. Got grandfather's journals, you say, patting the leather satchel tucked beside you. Every lesson, every improvement, every mistake. 3 generations of frontier knowledge. Those journals, your most prized possession. Thomas Marshall Sr. began recording his security innovations in 1760, documenting each improvement and the reasoning behind it. William continued the tradition. Now, the responsibility falls to you. By mid-afternoon, you reach the site. Just as you envisioned, a gentle slope with the creek providing water to the south, a stand of hardwood trees offering building materials to the north. Open prairie surrounds the rise, giving you clear visibility in all directions. Prairie's different from forest, William cautions as you begin unloading the wagons. Different threats, different protections needed. I know, Pa, you say. Less cover for raiders to approach, but also less material for palisades and barriers. This is the evolving challenge of frontier security, adapting proven systems to new environments. What worked in the forests of Pennsylvania and Ohio needs modification for the open expanses of Illinois. The first night, you establish a basic camp, wagons circled, a small fire for cooking, rifles close at hand. Even before building shelter, you set simple alarms, tin cans with pebbles strung on ropes between the wagons. Just like grandfather taught, you tell Rebecca as she watches you work. She nods, one hand still on her belly. The baby kicked when you said that. I think he approves. This is the reality for frontier women, preparing to bring new life into a world of constant danger. Rebecca understands the stakes. She grew up on the Ohio frontier, daughter of a family that survived the 1815 raids. She knows what happens to the unprepared. For 2 weeks, you and William work from dawn until dusk, establishing the core of your homestead. The cabin rises log by log, each placement strategic, each design element serving security as well as shelter. Unlike the eastern frontier, where massive trees provided logs a foot or more thick, the prairie offers smaller timber. You compensate by using double wall construction, 2 thin walls with packed earth between them. Raiders can shoot through a single log wall out here, William explains as you work, but they can't shoot through 3 feet of packed earth. By the time the cabin walls stand 8 feet high, ready for roof beams, you've already implemented multiple security innovations. Show me the water system again, William says one evening. You lead him to the stone-lined pit dug beneath what will be the cabin's main room. A covered cistern fed by a narrow channel leading from the creek. Diverted part of the stream, you explain? Small enough flow that it won't be noticed from outside. Gives us internal water access even if the main creek is watched or contaminated. William examines the stonework approvingly. Better than what we had in Ohio. Where'd you learn this? Grandfather's journals. He wrote about a family near Fort Pitt who dug something similar. Raiders poisoned their open well with a dead deer. This prevents that. The cistern is just one of many resource protection systems you've incorporated. The root cellar, dug deep and lined with stone, features hidden compartments for storing valuables and emergency supplies. The food storage area includes specialized containers designed to keep grain free from rodents and insects. critical for surviving winter when new supplies can't be obtained. "What about livestock?" William asks as you walk the perimeter of your half-built homestead. You point to the southern slope, where a shallow depression offers natural shelter. Barn and pens will go there, below the sight line of the cabin, so raiders can't use the structures for cover during an attack. And if the livestock are targeted first, firing platforms, you explain, pointing to the partially built extensions on the south corners of your cabin. Clear shots to the entire livestock area without exposing the defender. William nods, satisfied. You've thought this through. Had good teachers. As the days pass, Rebecca helps where she can despite her advanced pregnancy. She sews heavy canvas curtains for the windows, thick enough to stop arrows, with small flaps that can be opened for firing positions. "My mother made these for our cabin back home," she explains as she works, after the Wilson family was killed through their windows. Even while preparing for new life, she thinks in terms of protection. It's the frontier mindset, where joy and danger, creation and destruction, exist side by side. One morning, you wake to find Rebecca already up, standing in the doorway of the unfinished cabin. "Riders," she says quietly, pointing west. You grab your rifle and join her. 3 horsemen moving slowly along the creek, still a mile distant. "Get Pa," you tell her, then the ammunition box. William joins you moments later, his experienced eyes assessing the approaching riders. "Not moving like raiders," he says after watching for several minutes. "Too open, too slow." "Settlers, you guess? Maybe, or scouts." You position yourselves strategically. You at the front of the cabin, William circling to approach from the flank if needed, Rebecca inside with the loaded fowling piece, its spread of buckshot a last line of defence. The riders spot your cabin and approach directly. As they draw closer, you can make out a man about your age, an older man, and a boy of perhaps 15. "Hello, the cabin," the lead rider calls, stopping a respectful distance away. "State your business," you respond, rifle visible but not aimed. "Name's Michael Cooper. This is my father James and my son Daniel. We're settling 3 miles west. Saw your smoke and thought to introduce ourselves." You lower your rifle slightly but remain cautious. Frontier courtesy demands hospitality, but frontier survival demands verification. "Thomas Marshall," you reply, "my father William and my wife Rebecca." The older Cooper nods toward William, who has emerged from his flanking position. "Smart man, covering your son's blind side. You folks been on the frontier long?" 3 generations, William answers. Something passes between the older men, a recognition of shared experience, shared knowledge. "We came up from Kentucky," James Cooper explains. "Lost our place there to raiders 2 years back. Building stronger this time." This exchange of security credentials is common on the frontier, establishing that both families understand the stakes, that neither is likely to become a liability to the other. You invite the Coopers to water their horses, and over a simple meal, the conversation turns to mutual protection. "Planning a sod barricade around their whole place," Michael explains, describing his family's security plans. "Can't get good timber where we are." "Sod works if it's high enough," William agrees. "How are you handling water access?" The conversation flows easily, specific techniques, materials, defensive positions, not theory, but practical knowledge earned through experience. "Thought about a joint signal system," James Cooper suggests. 3 miles is close enough for fire signals at night, smoke by day, you nod. Was planning to build a signal platform once the cabin was finished. Our place sits higher, Michael adds. Better visibility. We get a platform up. We could relay signals from further west too. This is how frontier security networks form, family by family, homestead by homestead, creating mutual protection systems that extend the effective range of each family's security. By the time the Coopers depart, you've established the basics of a cooperative defense agreement, shared signals, warning systems, even rough plans for mutual aid in case of major threats. Good people, William says, watching them ride away. Smart. Cooper mentioned others settling along the creek, you note. Might have enough families for a proper community defense plan by next spring. William nods approvingly. You're thinking right. Individual security only goes so far. As autumn approaches, your homestead takes final shape. The cabin is complete, double-walled, with firing positions covering all approaches. The barn and livestock pens are established on the southern slope, positioned for both protection and visibility from the cabin. Most importantly, you've implemented the strategic resource placement your grandfather first pioneered, ensuring that food, water, tools, and weapons remain accessible even if parts of your homestead are compromised. Water, food, and fire, William says one evening, sitting by the hearth as you make final preparations for winter. Those are what kill you if your outer defences fail. I remember the stories, you say. The Harmons who repelled raiders but lost everything to fire. The Williams family who had plenty of ammunition but no accessible water during a siege. Rebecca, her pregnancy now in its final days, joins the conversation. My mother always said security isn't just keeping danger out. It's making sure you can survive even when it gets in. This wisdom, accumulated across 3 generations of frontier living, shapes every aspect of your homestead design. The water cistern protected beneath the cabin floor, the hidden food caches, the fire prevention systems, clay-lined chimneys, buckets always filled, roof designs resistant to flaming arrows, even your workshop, the space where tools and weapons are maintained, has been positioned strategically with its own defensive features and escape route. Show me the tool security again, William requests. You lead him to the small workshop attached to the north side of the cabin. Unlike traditional designs, where tools are simply hung on walls, your workshop features locked cabinets for the most valuable items, backup storage for essential tools, and most importantly, a hidden floor compartment containing duplicate tools for critical functions. If raiders take the obvious tools, we still have backups, you explain. Can't replace a good axe or saw out here. William runs his hand along the workbench, noting the clever design that allows it to be quickly flipped and used as a barricade. Your grandfather would be proud, he says. He always said tools were as important to protect as weapons, can't survive without them. That night, as a prairie storm rolls in from the west, you complete the final security feature, the emergency shutters, heavy wooden panels that can quickly cover every window and firing position, designed to protect against both weather and attacks. Storm shutters that stop arrows, Rebecca observes as you install the last one. Frontier efficiency. You smile. One thing serving many purposes. That's how we... You're interrupted by a sharp intake of breath. Rebecca clutches her belly, eyes wide. The baby, she gasps. It's time. The next 12 hours test your preparation in ways you never anticipated. The storm intensifies, cutting you off from potential help. The baby, your son, seems determined to enter the world as dramatically as possible. His arrival complicated by his position. Through it all, the security systems you've built provide more than physical protection. They provide peace of mind. The storm shutters hold against howling wind. The cistern ensures clean water without venturing outside. The protected food stores mean Rebecca can be nourished during her ordeal. By dawn, as the storm subsides, your son announces his arrival with a lusty cry. William, who has seen enough frontier births to serve as a passable midwife, wraps the boy in a clean blanket. "Strong lungs," he observes. "Good sign out here." Rebecca, exhausted but triumphant, cradles your son. "What shall we name him?" You look at this new life, born into a world of both danger and possibility, and the answer comes naturally. "Thomas," you say. "Thomas Marshall III. William laughs, continuing the tradition. "In more ways than one," you reply, thinking of the journals that will one day pass to this child. 4 generations of security knowledge, the accumulated wisdom that keeps frontier families alive. In the weeks that follow, as Rebecca recovers and the baby thrives, you complete the final elements of your homestead security. The signal platform rises on the cabin's roof, a simple structure allowing communication with the Cooper place 3 miles west. The perimeter alarms extend in concentric circles around your property, tripwires, noisemakers, natural barriers channeling any approach through predetermined zones. By the time winter arrives in full force, your strategic resource placement faces its first test. Not from human raiders, but from the prairie itself. Blizzards isolate your homestead for weeks at a time. Temperatures drop to deadly levels. The security systems you designed for human threats now protect against environmental ones. The double-walled cabin holds heat better than traditional designs. The protected cistern ensures water even when the creek freezes solid. The livestock shelter, built into the southern slope, shields animals from killing winds. Different threats, same principles, William observes. During one particularly brutal storm, identify what can kill you, create systems to prevent it, have backups for when those systems fail. As winter gives way to spring, William prepares to return to Ohio. His assistance in establishing your homestead has been invaluable, but his own family, your brothers and their children, awaits his return. Before he departs, you walk the perimeter together one final time, a father and son assessing the security systems that represent the culmination of 3 generations of frontier knowledge. "You've built something remarkable here," William says as you stand on the rise overlooking your homestead. "Not just a cabin or a farm, a complete protection system." "Had good foundations to build on," you reply. William nods toward the cabin, where Rebecca sits in the doorway with baby Thomas. "And now you've got someone to build on yours." This is the cycle of frontier security. Knowledge passed down, refined, expanded, each generation adding new innovations while preserving the core principles that keep families alive in the wilderness. As William rides east the next morning, you stand with your family, watching until he disappears over the horizon. Your son, barely 4 months old, sleeps peacefully in Rebecca's arms, unaware of the dangerous world around him or the sophisticated protection systems that keep him safe. "He'll learn," Rebecca says, following your gaze to the child. "Just like you did," you nod. and he'll improve on what we've built. Find better ways. By 1850, as your son grows into a boy of 15, the frontier around you has transformed. The isolated homesteads have become a scattered community. The mutual protection networks have expanded to include a dozen families. The strategic resource placement pioneered by your grandfather has evolved into community-wide systems. What hasn't changed is the fundamental truth that shaped 3 generations of your family's approach to frontier life. Security isn't just about keeping danger out. It's about ensuring you can survive even when it gets in. Water, food, tools, weapons, all positioned for access even during the worst scenarios. Backup systems for critical resources, multiple escape routes, coordinated defense plans. As your son helps you update the family journals, adding new innovations and lessons, you realize that this knowledge, more than land or possessions, is the true inheritance of frontier families. The strategic systems that transform isolated cabins into survival-ready fortresses, the resource protection methods that mean the difference between life and death when outer defenses fail, the community networks that extend security beyond what any single family could achieve. These are the gifts passed down from Thomas to William to you and now to your son, the 4th generation of a family that has not just survived the frontier, but mastered it. And while you sleep soundly in your comfortable modern bed, consider this. The strategic thinking that keeps you safe today, the backup systems, the resource security, the community protection networks, all have their roots in the innovations of frontier families who created sophisticated protection methods from nothing but necessity and natural materials. The security we take for granted was born in cabins just like yours, developed by families who understood that survival meant thinking beyond the obvious, preparing for the worst, and protecting not just your perimeter, but everything within it that sustains life. This is the legacy of frontier strategic defense. Not just barriers against danger, but systems ensuring life continues even when those barriers fail. The crack of rifle fire echoes across the homestead as Thomas Marshall IV, your 15-year-old son, squeezes the trigger. 200 yards away, the tin can perched on a fence post jumps and falls. Better, you say, watching through the brass spyglass. But you're still pulling right. The year is 1850, and your Illinois homestead has prospered. What began as a single cabin on a prairie rise has expanded to include a main house, barn, workshop, smokehouse, and several outbuildings, all encompassed by a sod and timber palisade. Thomas lowers the Hawken rifle, frowning. Thought I had it that time. Close, you say, collapsing the spyglass. Let's check your stance again. You approach your son, adjusting his posture slightly. Remember what Grandfather William taught me. Rifle shooting isn't just arms and eyes, it's feet, hips, breathing. Thomas nods, repositioning himself. His hands are calloused from farm work, but they handle the heavy rifle with practiced ease. He's been shooting since he was 8, first with a small caliber weapon, gradually working up to the powerful Hawken. Why are we practicing at 200 yards again, he asks. Most shots around here are under 50. Because, you explain, raiders and wolves don't always give you ideal conditions. You practice the hard shots so the easy ones become certain. This is the harsh truth of frontier defense. When weapons become necessary, there's rarely room for error. A missed shot could mean death. not just for you, but for your entire family. Again you instruct, and this time think about your breathing. Exhale halfway, then hold before you squeeze. As Thomas reloads, you glance toward the main house where your wife Rebecca is teaching your daughters, Mary 13 and Sarah 11, to reload cartridges. Even the girls are part of the family's combat readiness system. On the frontier, every person, regardless of age or gender, must be prepared to defend the homestead. "Pa," Thomas says suddenly, rifle still not raised. "What's it like, actually shooting at a person?" The question catches you off guard. Though you've prepared your children for the realities of frontier defense, you've been fortunate. In 15 years on this homestead, you've only had to fire at humans twice, once at raiders who fled after the first shots, and once at a group of deserters during the Mexican War who thought your isolated farm would be easy pickings. You begin, then pause, searching for honest words. It's nothing like shooting at targets. Everything feels slower, louder. Your hands shake no matter how much you've practiced. Thomas listens intently. This isn't idle curiosity, it's practical knowledge he may one day need. "That's why we drill," you continue. "So when your mind is racing and your heart's pounding so loud you can barely hear, your body remembers what to do." Thomas nods solemnly, then raises the rifle again. This time his stance is perfect. He exhales, holds and squeezes the trigger smoothly. 200 yards away, another can jumps and falls. "Much better," you approve. "Now let's try moving targets." This rigorous training, not just in marksmanship but in all aspects of weapons handling, is the backbone of frontier combat readiness. Unlike the early days of the frontier, when a single rifle might be a family's only firearm, your homestead maintains a carefully selected arsenal. The long rifle for precision shots at distance, the shotgun for close-range defense where accuracy might be compromised by stress, pistols positioned throughout the homestead for immediate access, even-edged weapons, knives, hatchets, and Thomas's pride and joy, an old cavalry sabre traded from a passing veteran. After marksmanship practice, you move to maintenance training. In the workshop, Thomas disassembles his rifle with practiced efficiency, cleaning each component. "Tell me what happens if you neglect this," you prompt, watching his hands work. "Fouling builds up," he recites. "Accuracy suffers. In damp weather, the powder won't ignite reliably. In extreme cases, the barrel could burst. And on the frontier, that means death," he answers simply. This directness might shock Eastern sensibilities, but frontier children understand stakes from an early age. Weapons aren't sporting goods or status symbols. They're survival tools that must function perfectly when needed. As Thomas reassembles his rifle, Rebecca approaches with the girls carrying a wooden crate. "Finished 50 new cartridges," she reports. "The girls are getting faster." You nod approvingly. Ammunition management is another critical component of frontier defense. Factory cartridges are expensive and supplies unreliable. Most frontier families like yours reload their own, a tedious but essential skill. "Show your father what you've learned, Mary," Rebecca encourages. Your older daughter steps forward, her expression serious beyond her 13 years. From memory, she recites the loading data for each weapon on the homestead, the powder charge, bullet weight, and optimal use case. The Hawken gets 70 grains for deer, 80 for elk or humans, she states matter-of-factly. The shotgun gets 2 drams for birds, 3 for defense. Again, the frankness might disturb outsiders, but on the frontier, children who don't understand lethal realities become adults who don't survive to have children of their own. And where are our ammunition caches, you ask? Sarah, your younger daughter, answers, primary supply in the locked cabinet in the main house, backup cache under the loose floorboard in the workshop, emergency supply in the waterproof box buried by the north fence post. You smile at her perfect recall. This dispersed storage, another lesson from your grandfather's journals, ensures that weapons remain useful even if parts of your homestead are compromised. Good, you say. Now let's check the weapon positions. Together, your family moves through the homestead, verifying that firearms are positioned for maximum defensive coverage. The shotgun mounted horizontally above the main door, accessible but out of casual reach. The spare rifle secured behind a hinged painting in the main room. Pistols in hidden but retrievable locations throughout the house and outbuildings. Remember, you tell the children as you check each position, a weapon too securely stored is useless in an emergency. A weapon too accessible might be turned against you. This balance between security and readiness is a constant challenge. Unlike modern homes with their locks and safes, frontier homesteads needed weapons that could be accessed in seconds during a crisis. After checking their weapons, you move to the next phase of combat readiness training, deployment drills. At your signal, the family practices moving to predetermined defensive positions. Thomas takes the second-floor window covering the approach from the west. Mary moves to the reinforced corner of the main room, where loopholes provide views of the south and east approaches. Sarah and Rebecca take position in the central room, a fortified space that serves as a last redoubt. Time, you ask? Rebecca checks the watch pinned to her dress. 17 seconds. Better than last week, you note, but still too slow. Raiders won't give us warning. You run the drill again, and again. By the 5th iteration, the family can move from normal activities to combat positions in under 10 seconds, a speed that could mean the difference between life and death. Now the alternate positions you direct. This time the family moves to secondary defensive locations, positions that would be used if the main house were compromised or if attackers approached from unexpected directions. What if they come during harvest? Thomas asks during a break between drills. When we're scattered across the fields? It's a good question. Tactical thinking. You've trained your son not just to shoot, but to analyze defensive scenarios. Show me, you reply. Thomas leads the family outside, walking to the edge of the wheat field that represents both your livelihood and a tactical vulnerability. The tall grain provides potential cover for approaching threats. I'd position Mary at the windmill, Thomas begins, pointing to the structure that provides both height and visibility. She can see over the wheat and signal if there's movement. The rest of us would fall back to the equipment shed. It has better cover than trying to run for the main house. You nod approvingly. He's not just reciting lessons. He's applying tactical principles to specific situations. And if we're separated, you prompt. Rally points, he answers promptly. Primary is the old oak. Secondary is the north corner of the barn. Final is the hidden cellar entrance. These predetermined gathering locations, another innovation refined through generations of frontier experience, ensure that family members can reunite during chaotic situations without exposing themselves unnecessarily. As afternoon turns to evening, the training shifts to close quarters combat. In the barn, you've set up practice dummies made from straw-filled sacks. Not every threat gives you time to shoot, you remind the children. Sometimes the fight comes to your hands. You demonstrate basic techniques, not formal fighting methods, but practical, brutal moves designed for survival rather than sport. Where to strike for maximum effect. How to use common tools as weapons. How to break free from grips and holds. Thomas, already strong from farm work, picks up the techniques quickly. But you pay special attention to teaching the girls, who lack his physical power but might face the same threats. Remember, you tell Mary and Sarah as they practice breaking holds, you don't need to win a fight. You just need to create enough space to reach a weapon or escape. Rebecca watches from the doorway, her expression a mixture of pride and sadness. This is the reality of raising children on the frontier, preparing them for violence while hoping they never need the knowledge. "Dinner's ready," she announces finally. Everyone wash up. The transition from combat training to family meal happens smoothly. Another frontier skill, the ability to move between vigilance and normalcy, between preparing for the worst and appreciating the present. Over dinner, the conversation turns to the topic Thomas has been curious about for weeks, the psychological aspects of defense. Tobias Cooper says his father keeps human scalps on their palisade posts, he says between bites of stew. Says it scares off other raiders. You exchange a look with Rebecca. The Coopers, your neighbours who settled 3 miles west, have always taken a more aggressive approach to frontier defence than your family. Intimidation has its place, you acknowledge carefully. A reputation for effective defence can prevent attacks, but displays like that can also provoke retaliation. Your grandfather wrote about this, Rebecca adds, referring to the journals. He found that simple demonstrations of readiness, visible guard posts, well-maintained palisades, deterred most threats without creating blood feuds. This balance, between being known as dangerous enough to avoid, but not so provocative as to invite vengeful attacks, is another frontier calculation passed down through generations. After dinner, as darkness falls, the family transitions to night security procedures. Thomas takes the first watch shift, positioned in the small observation room built into the peak of the main house roof. From there, he can see approaches from all directions, even in limited moonlight. Remember the signal order, you remind him as he climbs to his post. 3 short whistle blasts for human threats, he recites. 2 long for animals, 1 short, 1 long if I'm unsure. You nod, handing him the signal horn that can alert the rest of the family if danger approaches. I'll relieve you at midnight. As Thomas takes his position, you and Rebecca prepare the younger children for bed. Even this routine includes security elements, checking window shutters, verifying that weapons are accessible but secure, ensuring that emergency supplies are ready if the family needs to evacuate during the night. "Do you think it's too much?" Rebecca asks quietly as the girls say their prayers. All this preparation, all this training for violence that may never come. You consider the question seriously. It's one that frontier parents have wrestled with for generations. How to balance security awareness with allowing children some measure of innocence. "I think about my grandfather's journals," you reply finally, about the families he knew who didn't prepare, who thought the frontier wasn't really that dangerous. None of them survived to question their choices. Rebecca nods, understanding the harsh calculus. Better to raise children with knowledge they might never need than to leave them vulnerable through ignorance. Later, as the household settles for the night, you check on Sarah, finding her still awake in her small bed. "Papa," she whispers as you adjust her blanket, "are we really safe here?" The question strikes at the heart of frontier existence, the constant tension between establishing a home and acknowledging its fragility. We're as safe as knowledge and preparation can make us, you answer honestly. Your great-grandfather, your grandfather, and I have spent our lives learning how to protect our families. All that knowledge is built into this place, into our routines. Sarah seems to consider this. "Like layers," she says finally. "Miss Davis at school talked about onions having layers." You smile at the comparison. "That's right. Our security has layers. If one fails, there's another behind it. And another behind that." This concept, defense in depth, is perhaps the most important principle of frontier security. No single measure, no matter how robust, can guarantee safety. Only multiple, overlapping systems provide reliable protection. "Now sleep," you tell her. "You have shooting practice at dawn." She nods, her eyes already closing. This too is a frontier skill. The ability to rest when possible, to conserve strength for when it might be needed. As midnight approaches, you prepare to relieve Thomas from watch duty. Checking your pistol, you ensure it's loaded and the percussion cap is properly seated. A weapon that fails when needed is worse than no weapon at all. Another lesson from the journals. Outside, the Illinois prairie stretches vast under moonlight. Your homestead, a tiny island of human presence in an ocean of grass, seems simultaneously substantial and fragile. The security systems you've built, the combat readiness you've instilled in your family, push back against the wilderness but can never fully tame it. You climb to the observation room, where Thomas has maintained his vigil with the diligence you've taught him. "Anything?" you ask quietly. "Coyotes to the south around 10, he reports. "Otherwise quiet." You nod, taking the signal horn as he relinquishes his post. "Get some sleep. We're running the evacuation drill at dawn." Thomas hesitates at the ladder. "Pa, do you ever think about moving east, where we wouldn't need all this?" The question doesn't surprise you. At 15, your son is old enough to understand that not all families live with such constant vigilance, such perpetual preparation for violence. Sometimes, you admit. But this land is ours in a way nothing back east could be. We built it from nothing. We've defended it. We've made it safe through our knowledge and work. Thomas considers this, then nods. "Guess I'll learn to make it even safer for my children someday." "That's the way of it," you agree. "Each generation builds on what came before." As Thomas descends the ladder, you settle in for your watch. Rifle across your knees, pistol at your side, knife in its sheath. Multiple weapons for multiple scenarios. Another principle passed down through the Marshall generations. From your elevated position you can see the Cooper homestead 3 miles west, a faint light indicating they too maintain night watches. Beyond them, the Clark place. Beyond that, the new settlement forming around the trading post. What began as isolated homesteads has evolved into a loose network of mutually supporting families. The Marshalls, Coopers, Clarks, and others have developed coordinated defense plans, shared signal systems, even rotation schedules for longer-range scouting and patrols. This is the final evolution of frontier combat readiness, not just family defense, but community security. The recognition that even the best-prepared homestead is vulnerable alone, but resilient as part of a larger network. By 1865, as the Civil War draws to its bloody close, the frontier itself has transformed. What was wilderness when you arrived is now linked by roads, mail routes, even telegraph lines in some areas. Law enforcement, tentative and unreliable but present, has begun to extend its reach. The combat readiness that kept your family alive through decades of frontier threats adapts to these changing conditions. The weapons remain maintained and positioned. The training continues. But the immediate dangers gradually recede as civilization advances. Yet the knowledge remains vital, preserved in the journals, refined through practice, passed to the next generation. The weapons skills, the tactical coordination, the emergency protocols developed through blood and experience. Because the frontier family understands what Eastern urbanites often forget. Security is never permanent. It exists only through vigilance, preparation, and the readiness to defend what matters when all other measures fail. And as you rest in your comfortable modern bed, free from the need to keep weapons close at hand or maintain night watches, consider this. The combat readiness that frontier families developed, their systematic approach to selecting, maintaining and deploying weapons, their tactical training and coordination, their psychological preparation for violence, represented not brutality, but wisdom. The wisdom to recognize that in a world of potential threats, the final layer of security is always the readiness to stand and fight when necessary, to defend your family when all other systems have failed, to ensure that the knowledge and skills of effective resistance pass to the next generation, whether they ever need to use them or not. This is the legacy of frontier combat readiness. Not just the ability to use weapons effectively, but the systematic approach to ensuring that when violence becomes unavoidable, you are prepared to survive it. And as dawn breaks across the Illinois prairie, Thomas Marshall IV takes the watch from his father, scanning the horizon with clear eyes and steady hands, carrying forward a tradition of vigilance that has kept his family alive for 4 generations on the American frontier. Ready to defend, ready to survive, ready to pass the knowledge to his own children someday. This is the way of the frontier. This is the Marshall legacy. This is how families survived. The knife blade flashes in the morning light as it arcs toward your throat. You twist sideways, the blade missing you by inches. Your hand clamps around your attacker's wrist, forcing the arm down and away. Your other hand drives upward, palm striking under the chin. Good, your father says, stepping back and lowering the wooden training knife. You didn't flinch that time. You're Thomas Marshall IV, now 30 years old, and the year is 1865. The Civil War has officially ended, though its aftershocks still ripple across the nation. Your Illinois homestead has prospered, but prosperity on the frontier doesn't mean the end of danger. Sometimes it makes you a more tempting target. Again, your father says, circling you on the packed dirt of the training yard. Though in his 50s now, Thomas Marshall III moves with the controlled precision of a man who has spent his life preparing for violence while hoping to avoid it. He lunges again, the wooden knife aiming for your ribs this time. You sidestep, trap his arm, and execute the disarming technique he taught you years ago, twisting the wrist while applying pressure to the thumb. The training knife falls to the dirt. Better, he approves. But in a real fight, there are no rules, no pauses, and no second chances, you finish for him, reciting the mantra you've heard since childhood. Your father nods, retrieving the training knife. Exactly. A knife fight isn't like rifle combat. It's intimate, messy. The man who hesitates dies. This is the harsh reality of close-quarters defense on the frontier. When threats breach your outer defenses, when firearms are empty or inaccessible, survival comes down to raw skills with whatever weapons remain at hand. From the edge of the training yard, your wife Catherine watches with your 3 children, William, 12, Emma, 9, and little James, 6. Her expression is troubled. Do they really need to see this? She asks when your father calls a break in the training. Catherine grew up in a settlement town, not an isolated homestead. Though she understands frontier dangers, the methodical preparation for violence sometimes disturbs her. They do, you answer gently. William is already learning. The younger ones need to understand too. Your oldest son steps forward eagerly. My turn for knife practice, grandfather. Your father considers the boy, then shakes his head. Not today. Today you're learning something more important. He leads William to where Catherine sits with the younger children. From his pocket he produces a small leather pouch. Medical supplies, he explains, opening it to reveal needle and thread, small scissors, bandages and vials of various powders and tinctures. When the fighting ends, the real battle often begins. This is another critical aspect of frontier crisis management, the ability to treat injuries sustained during defensive actions. On the frontier, no doctors wait nearby. A family's survival often depends on their own medical knowledge as much as their combat skills. I don't want to be a doctor, William protests. I want to learn fighting like Pa. Your father's expression grows serious. Your great-grandfather, Thomas Marshall, fought off 3 raiders near Fort Pitt in 1790, killed 2, drove off the 3rd, then bled to death from a wound he could have treated himself if he'd known how. William's eyes widen. This family story, preserved in the journals but rarely discussed, makes the point more effectively than any lecture could. Is that true, Pa? He asks, turning to you. You nod solemnly. That's why our family became so focused on complete protection systems. Not just keeping danger out, but surviving when it gets in. Over the next hour, your father instructs William in basic wound treatment, how to clean cuts, stop bleeding, stitch injuries that require it. The lesson is practical, direct, and potentially life-saving. Meanwhile, you take Emma and James to the cabin for their own form of crisis training. What to do if strangers approach while the adults are working the fields. Show me the hiding place again, you prompt Emma as you enter the main room. Your daughter moves confidently to the large hearth that dominates one wall of the cabin. She reaches up into the chimney, her small fingers finding a hidden lever. When pulled, a concealed door in the stonework swings open, revealing a space large enough for 2 children to hide. And what do you do once inside, you ask? Pull the door closed, Emma recites. It locks automatically. Stay quiet no matter what. Don't come out until we hear the family whistle. You nod approvingly. And if you can't reach the chimney hide because bad people are too close? James, not to be outdone by his older sister, pipes up. under the floorboards in the pantry, or the false wall in the root cellar. These hidden spaces, developed over 4 generations of frontier living, represent the final layer of protection for those most vulnerable. When prevention fails, when barriers are breached, when combat goes badly, these last resort hiding places might save the children even if the adults fall. And if all the hiding places are blocked, you ask, your voice gentle but serious. The children exchange glances, their expressions solemn. Emma answers, "Run for the Cooper place. Don't use the road. Stay in the tall grass. If we hear anyone coming, lie flat and don't move." "Good," you say, hugging them both. "I pray you'll never need this knowledge, but on the frontier, better to know and not need than need and not know," they finish in unison, repeating another family saying that dates back to your grandfather's time. Outside, Catherine helps your father put away the medical supplies. Her initial discomfort has faded as she's recognized the practical value of the training. "My mother knew basic doctoring," she admits, "but nothing like this. The way you've systematized it." Your father nods. "My father William learned from a surgeon during the War of 1812. Added what he learned to the family journals. Each generation builds on the last." This pattern, knowledge preserved, expanded, and transmitted, lies at the heart of frontier survival. The medical techniques your father teaches aren't merely folk remedies, but a systematic approach to trauma care developed through harsh experience. Later that day, as afternoon heat gives way to evening cool, your family gathers for another aspect of crisis preparation, the emergency response drills that coordinate your actions during different types of threats. "Fire scenario," your father announces without warning. Immediately the family snaps into practiced motion. Catherine grabs the younger children while you and William throw open the cabin shutters, not to escape through them, but to prevent pressure build-up that could trap everyone inside. Your father retrieves the water buckets positioned strategically throughout the cabin. "Time?" he asks when everyone has completed their assigned tasks. 12 seconds, Catherine reports, checking the watch she wears pinned to her dress. Fire represented one of the most dangerous threats to frontier families, capable of destroying in minutes what had taken years to build. Unlike human attackers, it couldn't be shot or reasoned with. Unlike wild animals, it couldn't be scared away. "Good," your father approves. "Now let's try the night raid scenario." This drill is more complex, simulating a situation where attackers breach the outer defenses during darkness. Each family member has specific responsibilities and fallback positions. You and your father take primary defensive positions while Catherine guides the children to the most secure room. William, at 12, now considered old enough for supporting tasks, retrieves additional ammunition and the backup weapons from their hidden storage. 17 seconds, Catherine reports when everyone is in position. 3 seconds slower than last month. "Not good enough," your father says, though his tone remains measured rather than harsh. In a real night raid, those 3 seconds could be fatal. You run the drill again and again. By the 5th iteration, the family completes the sequence in under 14 seconds, a speed that could mean the difference between life and death if raiders ever breach your perimeter during darkness. Now the medical emergency drill your father directs. This scenario simulates an injury during an attack. Specifically, your father pretends to have taken a bullet to the shoulder. Catherine immediately applies pressure to the wound while you maintain defensive positions. William retrieves the medical kit and assists his mother. 22 seconds, Catherine announces. Better than last time. These drills, practiced monthly since you were a child, have created a family that functions like a well-oiled machine during crisis. Each person knows their role, their fallback position, their secondary tasks if the primary plan fails. As evening deepens toward night, the family transitions to another critical aspect of frontier crisis management, the psychological preparation for extreme situations. Seated around the main table, your father spreads out a rough map of the homestead and surrounding area. Today we're discussing the worst-case scenario, he says gravely. Total defensive failure. The homestead is overrun. We're separated, injured, and the children are at risk. This exercise, part strategic planning, part psychological preparation, addresses the situation frontier families feared most, the complete collapse of their protective systems. Catherine and the children would head for the hidden ravine, you begin, pointing to a location 3 miles east. It has water, natural cover, and 3 different routes to the Cooper place. Your father nods. I'd create a diversion from the north field, he adds. Draw any pursuers away from their escape route. And I'd circle around to meet them at the ravine, you continue, using the creek bed for concealment. William, listening intently, raises a question. But what if the ravine is already watched? Or if there's flooding like last spring? This is exactly the purpose of the exercise, to think through contingencies, to prepare mentally for adapting when plans fail. Good thinking, your father approves. Where's our secondary fallback point? The old hunter's cabin on Willow Creek, Catherine answers promptly. 6 miles southeast, stocked with emergency supplies last autumn. The discussion continues, examining contingencies, alternate routes, recognition signals that would allow separated family members to identify each other safely. The goal isn't just tactical planning, but psychological preparation, reducing the paralysis that often accompanies crisis by having preconsidered options. Remember, your father says as the exercise concludes, in a true crisis, plans rarely survive first contact with danger. What matters is having the framework to adapt. This wisdom, earned through generations of frontier living, distinguishes true crisis management from mere reaction. The Marshall family doesn't just respond to emergencies, it anticipates them, prepares for them, and develops systematic approaches to surviving them. As night settles fully over the homestead, the family transitions to evening routine. The children are put to bed with stories, some entertainment, some disguised lessons in courage and quick thinking. The adults check security measures, verify that weapons are accessible, and set the night watch rotation. Before retiring to your own room with Catherine, you find your father on the cabin's small porch, looking out at the starlit prairie. You think I'm pushing the children too hard with all this preparation, he says. It's not a question, but an acknowledgement of the tension you both feel. The desire to protect the young ones from fear while preparing them for dangers that might come. I think about that too, you admit. William seems to thrive on it. Emma takes it seriously. But James, he has nightmares sometimes. Your father nods, his expression thoughtful. Your grandfather had the same concern with your Aunt Emma. He wrote about it in the journals, said he'd rather give her nightmares than leave her unprepared for real dangers. Harsh way to look at it, you observe. The frontier is harsh, he replies simply, but maybe we can find a better balance. Focus more on the recovery skills with James, medical training, food finding, fire making, less on the combat aspects until he's older. This willingness to adapt, to recognize that different temperaments require different approaches, represents another evolution in the Marshall family's protection philosophy. Security isn't one size fits all, even within a single family. The next morning brings another aspect of frontier crisis preparation, what your grandfather called the aftermath planning. This refers to the procedures for recovering after a defensive action, preparing for potential follow-up attacks, and re-establishing normal security. After repelling raiders, your father explains to William as you all inspect the perimeter fences, the greatest danger is often what comes next. Why? William asks. Didn't we already win? Initial attacks are sometimes probes, you explain, testing defenses, looking for weaknesses. The real assault might come later, when they think we're relieved or injured. Catherine, walking with Emma and James, adds her own insight. Or when we're busy repairing damage from the first attack and not paying attention to our surroundings. This understanding that survival doesn't end when the immediate threat is repelled shaped the development of formal recovery protocols. The Marshall family journals detail specific procedures for different post-crisis scenarios. After repelling raiders, treat injuries, reload all weapons, position lookouts, repair essential defenses, send messages to neighbouring homesteads warning of danger. After fires, verify all embers are extinguished, salvage essential supplies, establish temporary shelter if needed, postcards in case the fire was deliberately set as a distraction. After storms, check for damage that might compromise security, clear debris that could provide cover for approaches, verify that water sources haven't been contaminated. The Cooper family lost their first homestead in Kentucky that way, your father tells William, survived an initial attack, let their guard down during repairs, and were hit again 2 days later. Only their oldest boy survived by hiding in a hollow tree. These stories, passed between frontier families as warnings and lessons, provided the experiential foundation for systematic post-crisis procedures. As the morning progresses, you turn to another aspect of crisis management, the recovery of resources during emergency situations. At the smokehouse, your father demonstrates techniques for quickly salvaging preserved food if the main structures are compromised. 30 seconds, he instructs William, handing the boy an empty sack. Gather what would keep your family alive for 3 days. Go. William moves through the smokehouse with purpose, selecting items that offer maximum nutrition with minimum weight. Smoked venison, preserved berries, hard biscuits. Time, your father calls after half a minute. William presents his selections for inspection. Your father nods approvingly. Good choices. Protein, carbohydrates, and enough variety to prevent fatigue. One suggestion, add salt. If you're fleeing into the wilderness, you'll need it, especially in summer. This practical knowledge, what to prioritize when you might have only seconds to gather survival supplies, represents another layer of frontier crisis management. Not just fighting threats, but recovering from them with what you need to survive. Meanwhile, in the cabin, Catherine teaches Emma and James another recovery skill: how to purify questionable water using the charcoal filtering method your grandfather developed during his time in Ohio. If raiders poison the well, or the creek is contaminated after flooding, she explains, layering charcoal, sand and cloth in a wooden bucket. This might be the difference between life and death. The children watch attentively as murky water poured into the top emerges clearer, though not perfectly clean, from the bottom spout. It doesn't remove all dangers, Catherine cautions, but it's better than drinking straight from puddles if you're hiding in the wilderness. By midday, the family gathers for another aspect of crisis training, what your grandfather called the leadership transition drill. This uncomfortable but necessary exercise prepares the family for continuing effective defense if key members are incapacitated. William, your father begins solemnly, imagine I've been killed and your father is badly wounded. Your mother is attending him. You're the only one able to coordinate defense. What are your first actions? The boy, sobered by the scenario, thinks carefully before answering. Get Emma and James to the chimney hiding place. Verify all doors and shutters are secured. Load the shotgun because it's easiest for me to handle. Position myself where I can see both the front approach and the room where Pa and Mother are. Your father nods. And if attackers are trying to break in? Fire a warning shot through the loophole, William answers. If they keep coming, aim for centre mass like you taught me. The matter-of-fact way your son discusses potentially killing intruders might shock outsiders. But on the frontier, children who couldn't defend the family in extremis often didn't survive to adulthood. And after the immediate danger, your father prompts, William considers. Send the emergency signal to the Coopers. 3 smoke columns in daytime, 3 fire flashes at night. Good, your father approves. You're thinking beyond the moment. That's what crisis management requires. This preparation for leadership succession, ensuring that protection systems remain effective even when normal family hierarchies are disrupted, represents another sophisticated aspect of frontier crisis response. As afternoon progresses, the training turns to psychological aspects of close-quarters defense, specifically techniques for maintaining focus and effectiveness during extreme stress. Your hands will shake, your father tells William during marksmanship practice. Your mouth will dry out. Your vision might narrow to a tunnel. These are normal responses. You can't prevent them, but you can function through them. He demonstrates breathing techniques developed over generations of frontier crisis response. Controlled inhalation through the nose, measured exhalation through the mouth, maintaining regular rhythm even when instinct urges shallow, rapid breaths. This keeps oxygen flowing to your brain, he explains. Helps you think clearly when everything in you wants to panic. This attention to the psychological dimensions of crisis response distinguished the most effective frontier families from those who merely had good physical defenses. The ability to think clearly, adapt quickly, and maintain coordination under extreme stress often made the difference between survival and tragedy. By evening, as the family concludes the day's training, you gather in the main room where the journals of 4 generations of marshals are stored in a fire-resistant metal box. Another innovation your grandfather added after seeing too many families lose critical knowledge to flames. Today, you've practiced skills we hope you'll never need, your father tells the children. Close quarters defense, medical treatment, emergency evacuation, resource recovery. These are the final layers of our family's protection system. What happens when all other measures fail? He removes the oldest journal from the box. Your great-grandfather's original writings from the 1750s and 60s, its leather cover worn smooth by decades of handling. Thomas Marshall Sr. began documenting these techniques after losing friends and neighbours to threats they should have survived. William Marshall expanded them based on experiences in Ohio. Your father and I have added what we've learned in Illinois. He hands the journal reverently to William. One day, you'll add your own knowledge to these pages. You'll discover better ways to protect your family. That's how we survive. By learning, improving, passing down what works. The boy accepts the journal carefully, understanding the responsibility it represents. Not just a family heirloom, but a survival manual written in blood and experience. As night falls across the prairie, the family transitions to evening security routines. The children are settled in their beds. The adults verify that weapons are positioned, water buckets filled, escape routes clear. You take the first watch shift, positioned in the small observation room built into the roof peak. From this vantage point, you survey the homestead your family has built over decades. The main house, barns, workshops, fields. The physical manifestation of 4 generations of security knowledge. But the true legacy isn't the structures themselves. It's the systems that protect them. The crisis management protocols that ensure survival even when other measures fail. The close-quarters defense techniques that provide last resort options when threats breach the perimeter. This is what separates the families who merely built on the frontier from those who truly mastered it. The comprehensive approach to security that addresses not just prevention, but response and recovery. Not just keeping danger out, but surviving when it gets in. And as the stars wheel overhead, you maintain your vigil, another link in the unbroken chain of watchfulness that stretches back to your great-grandfather's first night on the Pennsylvania frontier, carrying forward the knowledge that has kept your family alive for over a century of frontier nights, ready for whatever might come out of the darkness, ready to defend, ready to recover, ready to survive. And as you lie in your comfortable modern bed, free from the threats that shaped 4 generations of Marshall family crisis planning, consider this: the systematic approach to emergency response, medical preparation, and post-crisis recovery that we take for granted today was pioneered by frontier families who created sophisticated management systems from nothing but necessity and hard-won experience. The security you enjoy isn't just in the absence of threats, but in the knowledge, passed down through generations, of how to survive them when they appear. This is the legacy of frontier crisis management, not just defending against danger, but developing the systems to recover and rebuild when the unthinkable happens. The year is 1875, and the frontier has changed. What was once wilderness is now linked by roads, telegraph lines, and occasional railroad spurs. Small towns have sprung up where isolated trading posts once stood. The law has extended its tentative reach, though it remains thin and unreliable in many areas. You are Thomas Marshall IV, now 40 years old. Your homestead has grown into a prosperous farm, the centre of a loose network of families spread across what was once empty prairie. Your children are growing. William is 22 and recently married. Emma 19 and courted by a young man from town. James 16, and showing a talent for mechanical innovations. Your father, Thomas Marshall III, sits on the porch of the main house watching as riders approach from the west. At 65 he's slowed some, but his eyes remain sharp, his mind clear. Cooper's boy, he identifies the lead rider before you can make out details, riding hard. You step off the porch, hand instinctively checking that your pistol is secure in its holster. Old habits die hard, even in these more settled times. Michael Cooper Jr., son of your longtime neighbour, reins his lathered horse to a stop in your yard. His expression is grim. "Mr. Marshall," he pants, "Pa sent me. 3 families hit west of the settlement. Barns burned, livestock taken, 1 man killed. Your father is already on his feet." "Raiders?" Michael Jr. shakes his head. "Worse. Mason gang, 8 men, well armed. Rumour says they're moving east along the creek valleys." The Mason gang, outlaws who've plagued the region for 2 years now, targeting isolated homesteads and small settlements. Not the traditional frontier threat of Indian raids or predators, but dangerous nonetheless. "They hit the Richardson place yesterday," Michael continues. "Took everything. Left them with nothing but the clothes they wore." Your mind is already working, calculating. The Richardson homestead lies 12 miles southwest. If the Mason gang follows their usual pattern, they'll be looking for their next target within 20 miles. "Your father called the meeting, you ask?" Michael nods. "Tonight, every family from here to the settlement at our place." This is the evolution of frontier security in the 1870s, not just individual homesteads with their own protection systems, but networks of families with coordinated defense plans. What began as informal mutual aid has developed into sophisticated community security. "We'll be there," you assure him. "Spread the word to the Clarks and Washburns on your way back." As Michael rides off, your father returns to the house to retrieve the family journals. William emerges from the barn, alerted by the visitor. "Trouble?" he asks, wiping his hands on a rag. "Mason gang," you reply. "It's a community meeting tonight at the Coopers." Your son nods grimly. Though born into a more settled frontier than you were, he understands the protocols. Within minutes he's checking weapons, ensuring horses are ready, and alerting your wife Catherine and the other children. This immediate, efficient response, without panic but with absolute seriousness, is the product of generations of frontier preparation. The psychological readiness to shift from peaceful routine to defense stance without hesitation. By late afternoon, your family rides toward the Cooper homestead. You, Catherine, William and his wife Anna, Emma and James. Everyone armed, everyone alert. Your father remains behind with 2 hired hands to guard your place. Another aspect of community defense protocols. Never leave any homestead completely undefended. The Cooper place has transformed since that first meeting 40 years ago. What began as a simple cabin has expanded into a substantial compound with a large central building specifically designed for community gatherings. As you arrive, you see 24 horses already hitched outside. Inside, representatives from 15 families, some from homesteads, others from the small settlement 10 miles east, are gathered in what looks more like a town hall than a frontier defense meeting. Michael Cooper Sr., now in his 60s like your father, calls the meeting to order. The formal structure, with speaking protocols and voting procedures, is a far cry from the desperate ad hoc meetings of earlier frontier days. "The Mason gang hit 3 families in the past week," Michael begins. Based on their pattern, they'll strike somewhere within 20 miles within the next 3 days. This intelligence gathering, tracking outlaw movements, identifying patterns, predicting targets, represents one of the most sophisticated aspects of community protection networks, not just reacting to threats, but anticipating them. They're growing bolder, adds Sheriff Davis, a relatively new addition to these meetings. The settlement has had a sheriff for only 5 years, a sign of the frontier's transformation. 8 men, heavily armed, Davis continues. They've shown they're willing to kill if resisted. So we don't give them just one target to hit, you suggest, rising to speak. We consolidate. Bring vulnerable families together at defensible locations until they pass through or are caught. This strategy, temporarily condensing the security perimeter to protect more people with fewer resources, evolved from lessons recorded in your grandfather's journals. Isolated families were easy targets. Combined households with coordinated defenders were not. The Marshall Place can take 3 families, you offer. We have the space and the defensive positions. Others quickly follow your lead. The Cooper compound can house 4 additional families. The Clark homestead, with its stone walls and elevated firing positions, can accommodate 3 more. What about the Richardson family, Emma asks. They've lost everything. Henry Green, who runs the settlement's general store, speaks up. We're already housing them, taking up a collection too. This mutual support, not just in defense but in recovery, represents another critical evolution of frontier protection networks. The understanding that community survival depends on ensuring no family is left destitute by attacks. As the meeting progresses, tasks are assigned with practiced efficiency. Riders will spread warning to outlying homesteads not represented at the meeting. Defensive positions will be reinforced at the consolidated locations. Supply distributions will ensure each gathering point has adequate food, water, and ammunition. What about the psychological approach? William asks. Make them think twice about hitting any of our places. Michael Cooper nods approvingly at your son. The Marshall boy has the right idea. It's not just about physical defense anymore. This represents the most sophisticated evolution of frontier security, the understanding that reputation and perceived strength can deter attacks more effectively than actual confrontation. We make sure they know we're ready, Michael continues. Visible patrols between homesteads, signal fires at night, make our presence obvious without exposing ourselves. Sheriff Davis adds his perspective. These men are predators, not soldiers. They want easy targets. If they think they'll face coordinated resistance, they'll likely move on to easier pickings. This psychological warfare, creating the perception of strength as a deterrent, had evolved from hard-won frontier experience. Your great-grandfather's journals documented how certain Pennsylvania settlements remained untouched during raid seasons simply because they had reputations for effective defense. As the meeting concludes, practical arrangements are made. The Henderson, Mills, and Peterson families will relocate temporarily to your homestead. Others are assigned to the Cooper and Clark places. Patrol schedules are established. Signal systems reviewed. One last thing, Michael says before dismissing the gathering. We need to address the Wilkins situation. Uncomfortable silence falls. Jacob Wilkins, who homesteaded the land 8 miles north, is known for his solitary nature and refusal to participate in community defense efforts. He won't come to meetings, Michael continues, won't join patrols, says his own defences are sufficient. But he expects help if he's attacked, mutters someone in the back. This tension between individual security and community responsibility represents another challenge of frontier protection networks. Most families recognized that mutual aid was essential for survival, but there were always those who resisted integration. "I'll talk to him," you volunteer. "My father and his had dealings years back." The ride home is quieter, your family processing the developments. The frontier has changed in your lifetime, from isolated homesteads fighting for survival to interconnected communities with sophisticated defense networks. But danger remains, just in evolved forms. "It's strange," Catherine says as you crest the rise overlooking your homestead. "My mother would never have imagined community defense meetings with voting procedures and patrol schedules." Times change, you acknowledge. The threats change too. By the next morning, preparations are in full swing. The Henderson family arrives first. Parents, 3 children, and an elderly grandmother. You direct them to the east wing of the main house, recently expanded for exactly this purpose. Community defense planning isn't just about coordination. It's about creating physical spaces that can accommodate consolidated families during threat periods. "We've brought our own supplies," John Henderson says, unloading a wagon of food and bedding. "Don't want to be a burden." "No burdens here," you assure him, "just neighbours." This represents another evolution in frontier thinking. The shift from seeing each family as a fortress unto itself to recognizing that true security comes from mutual support and resource sharing. William takes charge of integrating the Henderson boys into the homestead defense system, showing them observation posts, communication signals, and evacuation routes. Eyre does the same with the daughter, while Catherine helps the grandmother settle in. By afternoon, the Mills and Peterson families have also arrived. Your homestead, designed over generations to house and protect a single family, adapts smoothly to accommodate 15 people. The sleeping arrangements, water access, food preparation, and defensive positions all expand according to long-established protocols. "Your great-grandfather would be impressed," your father says, watching the activity from his chair on the porch. He wrote about community defense, but never got to see it work like this. That evening, as darkness falls, the signal fires are lit on the highest points of participating homesteads, 3 flames in a triangle pattern, visible for miles. The message to the Mason gang is clear. These are not isolated, vulnerable targets. This is a community prepared to defend itself. Patrol riders return with reports. No sign of the outlaws yet, but tracks suggest they're moving in the region. The night passes under heightened vigilance, with rotating watches maintained by men from all 4 families now residing in your compound. The next morning you prepare to fulfill your promise to speak with Jacob Wilkins. Catherine watches with concern as you check your weapons. "You're going alone?" she asks. "Better that way," you explain. "Wilkins is suspicious of groups. One man might get a hearing." This nuanced approach to diplomacy, understanding that security sometimes comes through negotiation rather than confrontation, represents another sophisticated aspect of frontier protection networks. Knowing when force projection is effective and when it's counterproductive. The ride to the Wilkins homestead takes 2 hours. Unlike most in the region, His property shows minimal expansion from its original cabin. No outbuildings, no enlarged house, no visible improvements to defences. Just a small cabin and barn surrounded by untended fields. Jacob Wilkins meets you at the perimeter, rifle in hand. Though you've lived within 10 miles of each other for decades, you've spoken fewer than a dozen times. "Marshal," he acknowledges curtly. "What brings you?" "Mason gang," you reply directly. "They've hit 3 places southwest of here, killed 1 man, left families with nothing." Wilkins' expression doesn't change. "Sorry to hear it. Don't see what it has to do with me." You measure your words carefully. "We're consolidating, bringing vulnerable families together at defensible locations until the danger passes. Cooper Place, Clark Place, and mine are taking in neighbours." "I didn't ask for protection," Wilkins says flatly. "Not offering to protect you," you clarify. "Offering you a place among neighbours. Or if you prefer to stay here, at least share intelligence if you spot riders in the area." This diplomatic approach, not demanding participation but offering options, evolved from hard lessons recorded in your family journals. Frontier communities functioned best when cooperation was voluntary, based on mutual benefit rather than obligation. Wilkins seems to consider your words. "My father homesteaded this land. Said a man should be able to defend what's his without depending on others." You nod, understanding this perspective. It was common in the earliest frontier days. "My great-grandfather thought the same," you reply. "He wrote in his journal that he learned better after watching too many families fall because they stood alone." Something in Wilkins' expression shifts slightly. "Your family keeps journals about defence and such?" 4 generations' worth, you confirm, started in Pennsylvania in the 1750s, each generation adding what they learned. This piques his interest, as you'd hoped it might. The offer of knowledge, practical, proven security knowledge, often succeeds where demands for cooperation fail. "I'll keep my eyes open," Wilkins concedes finally. "See any strangers? I'll send my boy to let Cooper know." It's not full participation in the community defense network, but it's a start. Another lookout, another set of eyes watching the approaches. In frontier security, small gains matter. As you ride back to your homestead, you reflect on how protection systems have evolved. Your great-grandfather's journals described security primarily in terms of physical barriers and weapons. Your grandfather added psychological elements and family coordination. Your father expanded to multi-family defense networks. Now, your generation has developed sophisticated community-wide systems that integrate physical, psychological and social aspects of security. Upon your return, you find increased activity at your homestead. 3 riders from town have brought news. The Mason gang was spotted 15 miles south, heading northeast along the creek that runs near your property. "They'll be in our area by tomorrow," William reports. "Sheriff's forming a posse, but they're outnumbered." The community response shifts to high alert. Children are restricted to the inner areas of the homestead. Additional ammunition is distributed to defensive positions. The patrol schedule intensifies, with riders maintaining contact between the consolidated households. That night, your father gathers everyone in the main room. Not just your family, but all 4 families currently sheltering in your homestead. The elderly Henderson grandmother, the Mills children, the Peterson father recovering from a broken leg that makes him especially vulnerable. Some of you are too young to remember when each family stood alone against dangers, your father begins, when there was no sheriff, no town within riding distance, no telegraph to call for help. The room is silent. Everyone listening to this elder who bridges the gap between frontier past and more settled present. In those days, a family's security depended entirely on their own preparations, their own vigilance. Many didn't survive. He looks around the room, his gaze lingering on the children. What you're experiencing now, this coming together, this mutual protection, this is the evolution of frontier security. Not just stronger walls or better weapons, but stronger communities. This perspective, seeing security as a community achievement rather than just a family responsibility, represents the most sophisticated development in frontier protection thinking. The recognition that true safety comes not just from keeping danger out of your own homestead, but from creating environments where danger is less likely to approach any homestead. The next morning brings the confrontation everyone has been preparing for, but not in the way expected. As dawn breaks, a rider approaches your homestead at full gallop. It's Michael Cooper Jr. again, his horse nearly spent. They hit the Wilkins place at first light. He pants as you meet him in the yard, but something went wrong for them. Shots fired, they scattered. "Wilkins?" you ask urgently. "Alive." His son took a bullet in the shoulder but should recover. They're bringing them to the Cooper place now. What unfolds over the next hours demonstrates the full evolution of frontier community defense. The wounded Wilkins boy is treated by 3 different women with medical knowledge, using supplies contributed from multiple families. Riders patrol expanded perimeters around all 3 consolidated locations. The sheriff and his small posse coordinate with community members to track the scattered outlaws. By nightfall, word comes that 2 members of the Mason gang have been captured by the sheriff's posse, supported by men from the settlement. The others have fled the region, apparently deciding that this community is too well organized to offer easy targets. They hit Wilkins because he was isolated, Michael Cooper observes when he visits to share the news. Exactly what we tried to prevent. Yet even this apparent validation of community defense strategy comes with nuance. As details emerge, you learn that Wilkins hadn't been as unprepared as his isolated status suggested. His cabin had hidden firing ports that surprised the attackers. His son had shown remarkable marksmanship. The attackers who expected an easy target found anything but. Man had good defences, Michael acknowledges, just not good enough alone against 8 men. This represents the ultimate lesson of frontier security evolution, that the strongest protection comes not from choosing between individual preparation and community cooperation, but from combining both. The best defended homesteads within the strongest community networks created security that neither could achieve alone. Over the next week, as the immediate danger passes, the consolidated families return to their own homesteads. But the experience has strengthened the community bonds. Jacob Wilkins, humbled by his close call but respected for his fierce defense, begins participating in community meetings. His son, recovering from his wound, forms friendships with other young men his age, including your James. By 1890, as the frontier itself disappears into history, the security networks pioneered by families like yours have evolved into the foundations of modern community protection. The informal patrols become organized town watches. The mutual aid agreements develop into early insurance cooperatives. The the shared defense knowledge transforms into educational systems. Your father, now 80, still sits on the porch most days, watching this transformation with thoughtful eyes. The journals he inherited and expanded now fill a small bookcase. 4 generations of security knowledge, adapting to changing conditions while preserving core principles. "It's not the same frontier anymore," he observes one evening as you join him. "Soon they'll be saying there is no frontier left at all." "The threats change," you reply, echoing words you've both said for decades. "The principles remain." And indeed, as civilization extends its reach, as law enforcement becomes more reliable, as communities grow into towns and towns into cities, the fundamental security insights developed by frontier families remain relevant. The layered defense approach, multiple systems backing each other up, the psychological deterrent strategies that prevent attacks before they begin, the community cooperation that multiplies individual security efforts, the intelligence gathering that anticipates threats rather than merely reacting to them. These principles, developed through blood and loss on the American frontier, continue to protect communities long after the specific threats they were designed for have faded into history. As you sit with your father, watching your grandchildren play in the yard where you once trained for desperate combat, you understand that this is the true legacy of frontier protection systems. Not just the physical techniques or specific preparations, but the evolved understanding that security comes through layers of defense, community cooperation, and psychological preparation. "The journals," your father says suddenly, "they should go to William soon. His children need to understand where we came from, what it took to survive." You nod, understanding. Though the daily reality of frontier defense has faded, the knowledge remains valuable, not just as history, but as practical wisdom that translates across generations and changing circumstances. This is the ultimate evolution of frontier security thinking, the recognition that protection systems must adapt to new conditions while preserving core principles. That knowledge painfully earned should never be lost, even when the specific threats it addressed have changed. And as you rest in your comfortable modern bed, free from the constant vigilance that shaped generations of frontier families, consider this. The sophisticated approaches to community security that protect modern society weren't invented by theorists or legislators. They evolved organically from the practical experiences of families who created protection networks on the American frontier. The neighborhood watch, the community emergency response team, the mutual aid society, the intelligence sharing between communities, all have their roots in systems pioneered by frontier families who discovered, through harsh experience, that the strongest security comes not from isolation but from cooperation, not from keeping others out, but from bringing them in. This is the legacy of frontier community protection, not just survival, but the creation of security networks that transcended individual homesteads and laid the groundwork for modern concepts of community safety. A legacy written in journals passed from generation to generation, preserved in the memories of families who learned that true security comes not just from strong walls, but from strong communities. And as the frontier faded into history, this wisdom remained, a testament to the remarkable human capacity to create protection from nothing but necessity, cooperation, and the determination to see another dawn. The maple leaves turn crimson against the October sky as you rock slowly on the front porch of the house your hands built half a century ago. The year is 1900, and at 65 you've lived to see the turning of a century, something your great-grandfather Thomas Marshall Sr. could hardly have imagined when he penned the first security journal in a crude Pennsylvania cabin in 1760. You are Thomas Marshall IV, patriarch of a family that has survived and thrived across 5 generations of frontier life. But the frontier itself, that shifting boundary between civilization and wilderness, has been officially declared closed by the government. The wild spaces have been mapped, claimed, fenced. "Grandpa, tell the story about the wolves again," pleads 10-year-old Robert, your eldest grandson, who sits at your feet whittling a stick with careful concentration. "Which wolf story?" you ask, though you know exactly which one he means. Children have favourite tales they want repeated, comfort in the familiar. "The one about great-great-grandpa Thomas and the night pack that circled his cabin," Robert says, looking up with eager eyes. You smile, remembering how your own father told you this same story when you were a boy, how the telling of it shaped your understanding of security and survival. "It was winter, 1750, you begin, your voice taking on the measured cadence of a practiced storyteller. The Pennsylvania wilderness was deep in snow. Thomas Marshall Sr., your great-great-grandfather, had built a small cabin for his family, just one room with a dirt floor and a single window. As you recount the tale, wolves circling in darkness, the single rifle shot, the family huddled together through the long night, you realize you're not just sharing a story. You're transmitting security knowledge wrapped in narrative, teaching survival through family history." Robert listens with rapt attention, though he's heard this story dozens of times. When you finish, he asks the question he always asks. "Is that when he started the journals?" "Not quite," you answer. "That came after the neighbour family, the Nortons, were killed by raiders the following spring. Your great-great-grandfather realized that security knowledge needed to be preserved, expanded, passed down." You look toward the house, where the family journals now fill a custom-built bookcase in the study. 5 generations of security knowledge, from Thomas Sr.'s crude sketches of tripwire systems to William's detailed barrier construction techniques, from your father's weapons positioning strategies to your own community defense networks. "Can I see the first journal again?" Robert asks. "After supper, you promise, if your mother says it's all right." Your daughter-in-law, Elizabeth, William's wife, is protective of her children. Having grown up in Chicago, she sometimes finds the Marshall family's focus on security knowledge disturbing. "They should have normal childhoods," she's said more than once, "not be raised like little soldiers." It's an ongoing tension in your family. How much of the frontier security mindset should be preserved now that the frontier itself has vanished? How much of the hard-earned knowledge is still relevant in a world with telephones, police departments, and electric lights? The screen door creaks as William steps onto the porch. At 47, your son has fully taken over management of what is now a substantial farm rather than a frontier homestead. His clothes, store-bought rather than homespun, mark the transition from survival-focused pioneer to business-minded farmer. "Telegraph from James," he says, handing you a folded paper. He's arriving Thursday on the afternoon train. James, your youngest son, left Illinois 15 years ago to study engineering in Boston. Now he designed security systems for banks and businesses across the eastern seaboard. The frontier protection principles documented in your family journals, reimagined for a new century. Good news, you say, tucking the telegram into your pocket. Your brother's bringing those new journals he promised. William nods, though his expression suggests mixed feelings. While he values the family legacy of security knowledge, he sometimes questions its relevance in the modern world. The children are growing up in different times, he says, watching Robert return to his whittling. They'll never need to worry about wolf packs or raiding parties. No, you agree, but they'll face different dangers. The principles remain sound, even when the threats change. This has become your mantra in recent years. As the specific frontier threats faded into history, the security principles developed to address them remained valuable. The layered defense approach, the community coordination, the psychological preparedness. These transcend their origins. Supper that evening brings the extended family together around the massive oak table your father built. William and Elizabeth with their 3 children, your daughter Emma with her husband Michael Cooper III, grandson of your father's first frontier neighbour, and their 2 daughters. Even old Catherine, your wife of 45 years who normally takes meals in her room due to advancing age, joins the gathering in anticipation of James's visit. "Pass the biscuits, please," says Elizabeth, her Chicago accent still noticeable after 20 years in Illinois. And Robert, "Put that book away at the table." Robert reluctantly closes the first Marshall journal, which you'd allowed him to retrieve after extracting a promise to handle it carefully. His fascination with the family security legacy both pleases and concerns you. In a world increasingly removed from frontier realities, how will this knowledge serve him? "Is Uncle James bringing the new security journals he's writing?" asks Robert. You nod. He's documenting how the old frontier principles apply to modern problems. Banks worried about robbers, businesses protecting against thieves, even homes in big cities needing security systems. "It's quite remarkable," adds Michael Cooper, who has built a successful hardware business in the growing town 10 miles east. The same thinking that kept families alive on the frontier now protecting the commerce of a nation. This transformation from survival necessity to intellectual legacy represents the ultimate evolution of frontier security knowledge. What began as desperate innovations to keep single families alive has become a systematic approach to protection that transcends its origins. After supper, as the younger children are put to bed, you invite Robert and his 14-year-old cousin Sarah, Emma's daughter, to join you in the study. Unlike Elizabeth, Emma has embraced the family's security legacy, ensuring her children understand their heritage. "I want to show you something special," you tell the children, moving to the bookcase where the journals are kept. Beyond the original volumes written by your ancestors, there are now printed books, publications based on the Marshall family's security knowledge. You select one with a dark green cover, published just 3 years earlier, Principles of Homestead Protection, Lessons from the American Frontier. "This is the book your Uncle James helped me write," you explain, "taking what our family learned over 5 generations and sharing it with people who might never see a frontier but still need to protect what matters to them." Sarah handles the book reverently. "Are there copies in real libraries?" 16 university libraries now, you confirm, unable to keep the pride from your voice. And the military academy at West Point requested copies for their tactical studies program. The validation from formal institutions matters less to you than knowing the knowledge will survive, that the security principles your ancestors developed through blood and loss won't fade as the frontier recedes into history. What I want you both to understand, you continue, is that these journals aren't just about rifles and palisades and tripwires. They're about how to think about security. How to create systems that protect what matters most. Robert's brow furrows in concentration. Like layers, he says. Great-grandfather William wrote about security layers. If one fails, another backs it up. You smile, pleased by his comprehension. Exactly, and that principle works whether you're protecting a frontier cabin from raiders or a modern home from burglars. The specific methods change. The thinking remains sound. This, you believe, is the most valuable legacy of frontier security evolution, not the specific techniques, but the systematic approach to protection. The recognition that effective security isn't a single solution, but an integrated system of prevention, response, and recovery. As the evening deepens, Catherine joins you in the study, moving slowly with her cane. At 80, she's one of the last living links to the earlier frontier era, having been born in a settlement when Illinois was still considered wilderness. Filling their heads with old dangers, she asks, but her tone is affectionate rather than critical. Old solutions, you correct gently. That still work for new problems. Catherine settles carefully into a padded chair, her arthritic hands arranging her shawl. I was thinking today about that first winter here, she says, when Emma was just a baby. How we practiced what to do if raiders came during a blizzard. The chimney hiding place, you recall, and the emergency supplies buried by the north fence post. We never needed them, Catherine observes. All that preparation, all that worry, and the worst never came. Because of the preparation, you suggest. The systems worked by preventing what they were designed to address. This paradox, that the most effective security often appears unnecessary because it prevents the very threats it was created to handle, represents a sophisticated understanding that your family developed over generations of frontier living. Robert and Sarah listened to this exchange with wide eyes, witnessing the living connection to a past that's rapidly fading from American memory. The frontier era, which defined your family for 4 generations, is now something children read about in school books rather than experience firsthand. Will you show us the emergency supply cache tomorrow? Robert asks eagerly. The one by the north fence? You exchange glances with Catherine, who nods slightly. I suppose we could, you agree, though it's probably just a rusty box full of dirt by now. Haven't checked it in 20 years. That's the point, isn't it? Sarah says with unexpected insight. It was there if you needed it, but the goal was never needing it. Her understanding pleases you. The Marshall security legacy isn't about paranoia or obsession with threats. It's about creating systems that allow normal life to proceed without fear, precisely because you're prepared for the worst. As evening transitions to night, the children are sent to bed with promises of examining old security features the next day. You and Catherine retire to the main bedroom, a far cry from the crude sleeping arrangements your great-grandfather described in his earliest journal entries. Do you think any of them truly understand, Catherine asks as she brushes her silver hair, what it meant to live with constant vigilance? To know your family's survival depended entirely on your preparation? They can't, you admit. Not really. Just as I couldn't fully understand what my great-grandfather faced in Pennsylvania. Each generation's experience is their own, but the knowledge passes down, she observes, adapted, expanded. That's the true security system, you reply. Not the physical barriers or weapons or alarm systems, but the passing of knowledge from one generation to the next, each building on what came before. This perspective, seeing security as an evolving body of knowledge rather than fixed techniques, represents the most sophisticated understanding developed through your family's frontier experience. The next morning dawns clear and cool, perfect October weather for the expedition promised to the children. After breakfast, you lead Robert, Sarah, and several of the younger children to the north pasture, where an ancient oak marks the location of one of your homestead's emergency caches. Your great-grandfather William established this cache point in 1825, you explain, leaning on your walking stick as the children gather around. The idea was simple but vital. If the main house was compromised, if the family had to flee with nothing, these hidden supplies might mean the difference between survival and death. Robert is already on his knees digging where you indicated. The other children join in, turning the grim historical reality into a treasure hunt game. After several minutes of enthusiastic excavation, they unearth a metal box, rusted but intact. "Can we open it?" asks 6-year-old Emily, William's youngest. You nod, curious yourself about the condition of supplies buried decades ago. The lid creaks open to reveal contents wrapped in oilcloth, remarkably well preserved despite the years. Flint and steel for fire starting, a small knife, fishing hooks and line, hard biscuits now turned to dust, seeds sealed in wax. A small bottle that once held medicine. These were emergency basics, you explain as the children examine each item, the minimum needed to survive if you lost everything else. People really lived like this, asks Thomas, Elizabeth's middle child, who at 8 has known nothing but comfort and security. Your ancestors did, you confirm, and the preparation, the thinking behind caches like this, is why you don't have to. This, perhaps, is the most meaningful legacy of frontier security evolution. Not that modern Americans need to maintain emergency caches, but that the security principles developed through frontier experience created the foundation for the safety later generations take for granted. As the morning continues, you turn the exploration into a walking tour of your homestead's historical security features, the firing ports disguised as decorative elements in the original cabin walls. The sightlines carefully maintained through strategic planting and clearing, the signal platform now converted to a pleasant reading nook atop the main house. Your great-great-grandfather's journals described how settlers in Pennsylvania would hang gourds filled with pebbles from trees, you tell the children as you rest beneath a massive oak. When disturbed by intruders or animals, they'd rattle and give warning. "Like a burglar alarm," exclaims Robert. Exactly like that, you agree. The principle is identical. Create noise when a boundary is crossed without permission. Only the technology has changed. This connection between frontier innovations and modern security technologies fascinates the children, the tripwires becoming modern alert systems. the community patrols evolving into police departments, the signal networks transforming into telegraphs and telephones. By afternoon, as you return to the main house, you notice William watching the proceedings with a thoughtful expression. "They're more interested than I expected," he admits as the children run ahead. "I thought all this frontier security knowledge would seem irrelevant to them." "The specific techniques might be outdated," you reply, "but the thinking behind them never will be. Protection of what matters most is a constant human need, whether on the frontier or in a modern city." This perspective, that security principles transcend their historical origins, represents the most enduring legacy of your family's frontier experience. Not the specific methods, but the systematic approach to protection that can be adapted to any environment, any era. That evening, as twilight settles across the prairie that was once wilderness, you sit again on the porch, the family journals open on your lap. From the crude handwriting of Thomas Marshall Sr. in 1760 to your own careful documentation of community defense networks in the 1880s, these volumes represent 5 generations of security knowledge. Knowledge earned through vigilance and sometimes blood. Knowledge refined through practical application. Knowledge that transformed isolated survival techniques into sophisticated protection systems. And most importantly, knowledge preserved, not just in family journals, but now in published books, university libraries, and the evolving practices of a nation that has moved beyond its frontier origins but still benefits from frontier wisdom. As darkness falls completely, you close the journal and look out across the land your family has held for nearly a century. The physical frontier may have vanished, but its legacy lives on in community organizations, in security planning, in the systematic approach to protection that began with families like yours, creating safety from nothing but necessity and determination. This is the true heritage of frontier security evolution, not just survival, but the development of protection principles that transcend their origins, principles that continue to guard what matters most long after the specific threats they were designed to address have faded into history. And as stars appear in the Illinois sky, the same stars that guided your ancestors across uncharted wilderness, you understand that the most valuable security system isn't made of logs or rifles or alarm systems. It's made of knowledge passed down generation to generation, each building on what came before, each adapting ancient wisdom to new challenges. The frontier closed, but the frontier mindset, systematic, layered, community-minded protection, continues to keep Americans safe in ways most will never fully appreciate. This is your family's legacy. This is the Marshall inheritance. This is how frontier protection systems transformed not just isolated homesteads, but an entire nation's approach to security. And as you rest in your comfortable modern bed, free from the constant vigilance that shaped generations of frontier families, remember that the safety you take for granted was purchased through the innovative protection systems of those who came before, who created security from nothing but necessity and raw materials, who transformed individual techniques into sophisticated systems that could be passed down through generations. The frontier has vanished, but its lessons remain, offering protection, perspective, and peace of mind to those wise enough to remember them. Rest easy, knowing these lessons haven't been lost, that the knowledge continues to protect, even as you drift gently into sleep.